Good morning. Thank you to everyone who is attending virtually. We are waiting for one commissioner to arrive. We have an ETA of 9:15 now. And so we will be beginning our meeting at 9:15, we hope, once we have a quorum. Thank you for your patience and feel free to go get a cup of coffee and rejoin us in about 10 minutes. Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone who is joining us virtually. We are just about to get started. We do have our quorum now, and as soon as everyone is seated, we will start the meeting. Thank you for your patience.
Good morning. It is now 9:17, Thursday, September 12th, 2024, and I am calling to order the meeting of the Los Angeles Probation Oversight Commission. I am Eduardo Mundo, Chair of the Commission. Welcome, and we look forward to hearing from our panelists, commissioners, and the public today on a number of important issues. Sorry about the delay, but LA traffic is LA traffic. Now I will turn it over to Wendy Julian, our Executive Director, to explain how you can participate during today's meeting, and then she will call roll.
Thank you and good morning. We are recording today's meeting, and so if you're on WebEx, the session is being recorded. We're also showing the video live on YouTube, and you're also welcome to watch it later. We encourage here at the Probation Oversight Commission real public participation in our meeting. We welcome your comments live today in the audience or live on WebEx, or also you can write us your comments. The way we're going to do this is we will go through each agenda item. The Chair Mundo will present the item. There will be a panel presentation where we will go over any reports that are presented. Then the commissioners will comment, and then we'll go to public comment, and then we'll go back to the commissioner comments or any actions that will be taken on each agenda item. If you want to say something that is beyond the scope of the agenda items today, you're welcome to do that under general public comment at the end of the meeting. We will make sure that we're listening to comments before we take any action. If there are additional issues that take extra time, we may consider scheduling town halls or special meetings, and we will make that decision during the meeting. For today, I'd like to ask you to follow the following code of conduct. Please stop speaking immediately when your time ends. Please make sure your public comment relates to the subject matter of that item. Remain respectful of each other and the forum, and anyone engaging in conduct that disrupts the meeting is subject to being removed from the meeting. If you're here in person, it's easy to participate. Just stand up and go to the podium. If you're on WebEx, please use the raise your hand function to join the queue. You can do this by tapping the little hand icon during the item and we'll add your name to the list. If you're calling in and want to comment, you need to dial *3 on your phone and that will activate the raise hand feature. We'll call on you with your phone number. You will have to dial *6, and I'll explain this again later during the items, to unmute yourself. All commenters today will have 2 minutes unless the chair determines otherwise based on the number of commenters signed up for each item. And if you'd like to make your comment in writing, you can do so by sending it via email to info@poc.lacounty.gov. Please don't send a public comment in the chat. That doesn't comport with the Brown Act's regulations, and we won't be sharing that with the commissioners. It'll only be seen by our staff. As I said, we're broadcasting live today on YouTube, but there's no engagement with users on YouTube. You're welcome to subscribe to our YouTube channel to watch live meetings, recaps, and recordings. You also can follow our social media accounts on Facebook, Instagram, and Threads at LA County POC for more information about our meetings. And please continue to attend, and we ask you to invite others to attend. Buenos días y bienvenidos. Ya se ha iniciado la conferencia del Probation Oversight Commission vía WebEx y aquí en vivo y también en YouTube. Si le gustaría hacer un comentario público después de cualquier cuestión en la agenda, le voy a explicar cómo hacerlo. Tiene que hacer clic en la manita, que es un botón en la parte baja de la pantalla en WebEx, o también puede, si está llamando por teléfono, marcar *3 y eso le pone en la línea. Si está viendo la conferencia por YouTube, no puede hacer comentarios o los comentarios que hacen no se van a leer al grupo. Si prefiere hacer sus comentarios públicos en español, le daremos el doble del tiempo, que serían 4 minutos si no lo cambia Commissioner Mundo, y podemos proveer traducción al inglés si quiere, o usted puede proveer su propio traductor. Al iniciar su comentario, por favor, nomás avísenos que quiere hacer su comentario en español. I'm going to now call the roll. I was just checking to make sure everybody was sitting down. They are. So we currently have 6 active members on the Probation Oversight Commission, but because there are 9 commission seats, our quorum remains at 5. We do have quorum today, as we will see when we call the roll. Commissioner Dolores Canales? Commissioner Shay Jackson? Commissioner Melinda Kakani is absent today. Commissioner Don Meredith? Commissioner Diane Terry? And Chair Eduardo Mundo. Chair Mundo, we have 5 commissioners present and we have quorum, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Wendy. Let's proceed with item 2, the approval of the August 8th meeting minutes. Wendy, do we have any written public comments or live public comments for item number 2? Okay, thank you. Can I have a motion to approve the August 8th meeting minutes? We have a motion from Commissioner Meredith. May I have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Canales. Are there any changes to the minutes? Hearing none, commissioners, please vote with a voice vote.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Okay, let's move on to agenda item 3, which is to discuss and take possible action on an update on progress the Los Angeles County Probation Department has made towards reaching compliance with the California Board of State and Community Corrections, known as BSCC. Chief Deputy Epps is here to share recent BSCC findings of noncompliance related to staffing and programming calendars at Los Padrinos Juvenile Hall, as well as the status of the correction plan, also referred to as the CAP for LP. We also hope to hear about the spot checks that have been occurring at Barry J. Nadov Secure Youth Facility. Chief Ed, the floor is yours.
Thank you.
And good morning.
Good morning. I'll start with Barry J. Nydorf for their inspections, which were announced for the months of June and July. There are no non-compliant issues at Barry J. Nydorf. We are pending information for the August inspections, but we do anticipate that it's the same finding. It's the same, actually, Mr. Rayleigh just reminded me. So for LP, which is much larger, where the struggles have been much more significant. So in June, the targeted inspection focused on programming, and we did receive a finding of noncompliance with programming, and attached, I'll go into the corrective action plan that has been submitted to address those issues and related things that we're doing in support of that corrective action plan. Shortly thereafter, the next month, the focus of the announced targeted inspection was staffing, and we were non-compliant in staffing. I can tell you that for 13 days of that targeted month, we were below the mandatory minimums for staffing. So now, yes, the finding of non-compliance, but part of that is, can you still adequately meet the functions of the facility in doing that? So we were able to carry those out, but we were below the mandatory minimums. As a result, we do have a corrective action plan pending submission to the Board of State and Community Corrections, BSCC, which is due to them on October 11th. I will also talk about some things that we're doing that will be in that corrective action plan, but it's not complete. And so we don't have the plan to share today, but I can talk about elements that will be included in the plan. So if we can refer to the attachments for the corrective action plan. Oh, and there's a slide for the PowerPoint that's behind me as well. But that was really just more informational, because I think that regarding the issue of programming and how we're addressing it, more will come out of us going actually through the corrective action plan. But this is also very important. Or actually, I'll just ask the group, do you guys prefer that I go through it because, or focus on it? I think the plan, okay. So as you can see, where it talks about programs, recreation and exercise, which is section 1371 of the Title 15. So the non-compliance finding consisted of BSCC resulted from video reviews and their discussions with youth. The first part of those video reviews on randomly selected days in June indicated that many programs on the facility schedule and documented on the facility activity logs and program provider youth sign-offs did not occur. When scheduled and documented program was observed on video, there were many times that during the duration of the program that did not match the time indicated on the documentation. Youth not engaging in programs in non-compound units where there is less space for youth, they were lying on the floor, on benches, or on the floor, rather than engaging in any activity. I think it's important to note here too, that one thing that LP has historically stated is that there's not programming space, but I will address that as well. So oftentimes when programs are going on or youth are participating in those programs, it's in a co-located space in the day room where those youth that are not participating are also there with kids that are doing the programming, which we recognize is an issue. In discussions with youth indicated that units are not receiving consistent opportunities for programs. Some units receive more robust programming than others. Many youth reported that they are not interested in the programs that are being offered on their unit, and they prefer to engage in free time activities rather than the structured programming that's being offered. And as I stated, the finding of that, the result was a corrective action plan required. We did submit that in the timeframe, and the CAP as attached, which I'll discuss, has been approved. So if we can go to the next slide. And if we could go to the next slide. So in July, when there was the inspection, the focus of that inspection, of course, was staffing. And BSCC reviewed documents, reviewed daily facility reports and daily schedule from July through the 29th, July 1 through the 29th, 2024 for a cumulative total of 87 shifts, 7 a.m. shifts and 8 EM shifts. 17% of the shifts overall did not meet the department's required minimum staffing. The continued lack of staffing continues to impact delivery of required services and compliance with additional regulations. I will say here that we can control many things. We can put so many factors in place. We can have our corrective action plan well written. The plans for that can be well thought out. We can have all of the resources that can support that plan. But the one thing that we do not control is human capital. We do not control people's individual decisions to come to work. We do not control individual decisions when people understandably have been held over to fill in the gaps for when people have called out. People are tired. People are putting a lot into working. Those that come into work on a regular basis are held over. We've even begun deploying our court officers to work 1 weekend a day. They had previously been exempt from deployments because we were meeting our need of deployed staff. They are also having to pick 50% of the holidays in which the court is dark to report for work as part of the deployment as well. We've had court officers in the first group of deployment that I didn't get anything from anyone that had been held over for full shifts, but I can tell you I received 4 emails or 4 informationals, emails or text or something from court officers who did report for their deployment day. And some of them were held over anywhere from an hour to 3.5 hours until they could call in additional staff to fill in the gaps or the shift where someone had called out. So we completely understand how this is beginning to have a ripple effect in impacting others. An area of concern noted in the BSCC debrief on their inspection was that youth continued to be late to class. During their review of documentation, they noted that youth were late to class due to both LACO, Los Angeles County Office of Education, and probation. Some of the things cited in that were teachers being late due to lack of facility keys to access facility gates, and probation issues regarding movement, late breakfast, and sometimes kids getting up late and not being ready. So as a result of that, we are working on a corrective action plan, which is due to BSCC on or before October 11th, 2014. We are optimistic that that will be submitted the last week in September, if not sooner. And I can talk about, after I talk about the corrective action plan for programming, some of the things that we're doing, as I said, that will be represented in that plan. And if we can move into the next slide. So this is the final slide in this presentation. And for 2024, we have two upcoming BSCC comprehensive inspections. So I want to really stress the significance of these inspections, because what we've been seeing, this will be the first time that LP has had a full-on comprehensive inspection. This will be where BSCC comes out and they look at everything. We go through the entire code, many of the policies that are enumerated and outlined in the code, everything will be inspected. We have chosen to work with BSCC. We feel in the department that Barry J is doing well. As I stated, it's much smaller. Former Superintendent Tracy Novak left it in good condition to transition to our new superintendent, Eric Rayleigh. She did a lot of foundational work when we were coming into compliance with what we call the Big 11, the things that we were out of compliance with that led to us not being suitable. She did a lot of the foundational work, the heavy lifting, which now allows for, not easy, but for Mr. Rayleigh to take that over and continue to build on what she had already put in place. Their inspection will be separate from Barry J's in the month, because they will have their comprehensive inspection beginning September 22nd. That inspection will run through September 27th. We are pulling from all of our available resources within the department to assist with that. That is with pulling documents. As I said, it's very extensive. You get a full document list. I don't know if anybody's ever set in on the pre-briefing for the inspection. Those can sometimes go as long as 4 hours because of everything that can be laid out and the questions that you ask as staff, as administrators, and all of those things. So we have several people, even from our compliance team at LP, that are assisting to make sure that we have everything that we need. We are still looking at policies. We have to have people follow these. We know they have, but we're just, everything that you can think of, we're putting everything into that. September is big for Barry J. Immediately following that, within less than a month, we will have our comprehensive inspection at Los Padrinos. That will begin on October 12th and it will end on October 18th. I will say that we recognize that the challenges at LP are far more significant. I haven't sent it to the chief just yet, so I guess I won't. But I will say that we're doing everything that we can. I was just talking to Ms. Vest. I've been going through the entire list of mandates for probation that comes out for us every year in January, anything that may change or anything that's adult and juvenile. So I've looked at some things in the code that I believe that we are not fully taking advantage of as a department that will allow us to reduce the population. So that's something as recent as today that we're starting on. We've put together a comprehensive reduction plan that will allow us to do some things around that. Will it have the best results for the inspection? I am confident that we will do better than we have done in the past in the inspection. It is not uncommon for any facility, no matter how big or how small, to have some minor things that are not compliant that you can immediately fix. It used to be that when there was an inspection, that BSCC allowed actually for you to fix those things that were fixable in those moments, like, hey, if you can take care of this today, it won't be non-compliant. Because of the recent changes with that within the last 2 years, that is not something we can do. But we do expect that there will be some bumps at LP, but we're optimistic that we will have a much better showing than we have had in the past, and we continue to work diligently towards that. Our biggest barrier at this time is people in the seats, if you will, to use that phrase, to do the work, to show up, to do what we need done. It is not uncommon in what I look at every day in our population count to have several people call out, upwards of 30, but to have many of those replaced in real time, whether we call people in to take those spots, whether we deploy people in, but we are covering that. But it is not a healthy way to function. On the back end, we are continuing to recruit vigorously positions. We will be issuing a lateral request, recruiting people to laterally in, transfer to probation. That works for us because if we're able to get people that are lateral in at the line level and at the supervisor level, that allows us to do a couple things, to put people on the line in real time. Because if you look at what the law requires, once you're trained in probation to do the DSO position, detention services officers, it's called here, or supervising detention services officer, once you've had that training, you're golden. You can go to any county and work. You do not have to redo that because the law is the same, and the state requirements for that training are consistent across all departments. So with that being said, I'll pause for questions before moving into the specifics of the corrective action plan.
Commissioner Merida?
I just have a quick question on the laterals. I understand the lateral at the officer level, but the lateral on the supervisor level, are we not going to create a morale problem with people that could promote to that within the organization?
We have so many openings that we are looking to, of course, develop our own talent. You know, Chief Vera Rosa is very much in support of succession planning. Identifying talent is part of that and developing that talent. But we are in a crisis situation, and we need to fill some of those positions with people in real time that can get into those positions and let's get the work done before we promote people. And we are looking to do that, but we have to take other action steps around that to move us forward where we need to be.
I have a question.
Commissioner
So-
Jackson?
Me? Sorry, I didn't hear. Okay. So I appreciate the update on the corrective action plan. I do disagree that you say that we can't control human capital, and I do agree, you can't physically force employees to come in. However, you can do things to motivate employees to show up to work. And it's just not clear what efforts are underway or measures are in place to address the conditions that these employees are working in that's encouraging them to take time off of work in the first place. So I'd like to know which resources have been invested in improving the conditions for the employees, including their sense of safety, security, their well-being overall, most importantly.
We have begun rolling out a training called proactive supervision. Will redact portions of proactive supervision because it is very specific to the facility, and there are pictures and information in there that specifically go to security issues. So we can redact that, but we'll provide it. Proactive supervision is a process that goes in and it works with the youth in the facility, it works with the staff in the facility, and it works with any partners who are assigned to the facility. It's a comprehensive process that basically realigns, if you will. So for youth, for example, we spent a couple weeks ago going into all of the classrooms at LP to talk to the youth to say, hey, we're going to be rolling out a new program called proactive supervision. And proactive supervision will have requirements that these are the expectations for behavior. This is things that you can be rewarded for to follow the expectations of behavior. I talked to kids about beds. Superintendent Binion was involved in that process as well. These are the expectations that will happen. For example, one of the classes I went to, a young man had just finished, I call it lighting, just basic, keep it the term I know, had just finished lighting up his shirt, his gang name, his neighborhood, all kinds of a roll call on his sweatshirt that he sat there and wrote disses to other neighborhoods. That's disruptive. It can set off fights, it can set off disagreements. So I said, sir, do you mind if I use you as an example? And he said, why? And I said, you know why? And he said, I do. And I went on to explain why that was a problem. So we talked to every kid about what is proactive supervision, what does it change, what are we hoping to address for our youth to have better conditions, to be able to do better programming, to bring in new programming, to enhance the programming that we have, and very specifically said, and these will be the new expectations. Then there was a training for all supervisors and all directors that are assigned to LP, going through the entire presentation. This is the expectation. So some things that happen with that I can say that don't do anything with security is, how is a room supposed to look? What does the policy say about how many letters, how many books, how you're supposed to place your things in the room? Because if I'm the supervisor, if I'm the staff in the unit and I am not consistent from unit PQ all the way to EF and other units and beyond, then there is an issue. We can have pockets of positive behavior, we can have pockets of compliance, but if everybody is not on one accord, if we're not one voice, one sound in how we work with our young people, it is a problem. Inconsistencies are the roots of what can later become chaos, depending on how much you choose to ignore. In addition to that, 2 weeks ago, we did meet with representatives from our partner agencies that are assigned to the facility, including healthcare services, including mental health, including LACO. And we did a survey, if you will, a listening campaign of what they perceived as safety issues. What are some strategies that you have available in your shop that could support addressing behavior or improving behavior? For example, one thing that really stuck out to me that was provided as input from the LACO representative was that there is a process, and I'm sorry, I don't know what the acronym stands for, but it's called PBIS. And this is an intervention agreement that you have for youth that may have a 504 plan, may have an IEP, or disruptive youth in the classroom. And both parties agree to what this intervention plan looks like. Then the steps of this plan are deployed or put in place, if you will, can include a psychologist coming into the class to sit with the student under what's required in their plan. It can include up to an administrator sitting with the student. I can tell you, I began to ask staff, are we using this intervention process? Are we using PBIS? I cold called some people and said, have you ever done anything using PBIS? Can you tell me if you're aware of the plan on your unit for PBIS for any student that has an IEP? More importantly, do you know what students on your unit even have an IEP? Many of the people that I spoke to at different levels said no. So that's a tool that we would layer into proactive supervision as a strategy to gain control. And I hate to use the word control, but to gain compliance, because one thing we emphasize when talking to the youth, you're young people. I wasn't perfect at 15. Lord, no, so many people know that, but we're not expecting you to be perfect. Kids argue, kids fight, but when it is over and above what is normal and people are put at risk because of those things, there's a problem. So that's one strategy we've done. We are also working comprehensively with our consultant, Michael Miner, who has, as we've stated, taken a prominent leadership role at Barry J, with consultants that are embedded in the facility and working in real time with supervisors, mentoring directors, working with our youth. And this will just be on a broader scale similar to that, but much more targeted because of the vast size of LP, the population of LP, and the historic issues that have just existed at LP. So we are working with Mr. Minor, and we have a work group in place that has representation, again, from all of our partners, healthcare services, mental health, LACO, different people within the facility, and we are working on developing a comprehensive violence reduction program. Proactive supervision is a component of that violence reduction strategy. We are working on a graffiti abatement program within the facility. ISD has walked the facility to prioritize to talk about the painting, but we've prioritized first, let's get rid of the graffiti on the outside. We're talking with our teachers, our education partners. Can we have a process that requires that there's only washable markers used? Right now, kids get what I call freestanding issues of pencils, but oftentimes in a facility, when kids are issued pencils, there's a pencil block that has the 20 holes in the pencil block, and each of the pencils is numbered so that you know that you've gotten them back. So we're looking at the little things as well as the broader scale issues, perceptions of safety, behavior of youth that is significant and small. Because I am a believer, if you are the keeper of small things, it addresses the bigger things. So those are some of the strategies that we are doing to address the culture and the behavior in the facility.
Thank you for sharing all of that. I was not aware that those things were in place, but we'd love to learn more about it. If you could submit just some information to the POC describing what those strategies are. And I think that would just be really helpful to us.
Thank you so much. Yes, thank you. Sorry. Hello. Thank you for sharing and for all the information in the corrective action plan. And one of my questions was going to be similar to Commissioner Jackson's in opening, but I did hear your response to her question. And I heard, about Michael Minor mentoring with supervisors and directors and all the people involved, healthcare staff, LACO, mental health, teachers, education, public health. And one thing that I heard is how you said inconsistencies can become chaos. That really hit home because what I've seen or what I've heard is the floor staff, and nowhere were they once mentioned in the corrective action plan. So I'm wondering, was the floor staff anonymously surveyed on a vision of a corrective action plan or a vision on how to get employees to show up to work or to feel, I'm just, because I think it was part of the inconsistencies with them that were saying, I'd get a memo the night before saying I have to be here at 6 a.m, changing the schedule abruptly and things like that. And so I'm just wondering if that communication has kind of, Commissioner Mundo, am I asking the wrong question? Your face is looking.
I'm trying to figure out what floor staff is.
Oh,
Line staff.
oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. State prison mentality. Forgive me. I just, the look on your face next time to speak up because it was really throwing me off.
Sorry.
Anyways, as I was saying, the line staff, what were they involved in the correction action plan and the anonymous surveys or anything?
Well, thank you for the question. First, let me say, I say floor staff all the time. So two things happened. When we trained the supervisors and the directors, we got their input on the plan. And then the goal was, hey, you're in your units. You need to talk to your staff about this. What do they see differently? There were a couple strategies in proactive supervision, for example, that I thought, okay, XY, this may need to be altered a little bit because these are older kids that are there longer. And one of these units, while there have been some behavior issues, it hasn't been anything where they've had fights. I can't remember the last time they had a fight actually on this unit. Not to say that it's perfect, but these are things you have to take into consideration. So I trust that the directors, because to every campus, we have assigned director, assistant director, the supervisors, the seniors in the units that are within those campuses. So that was the message given to them. Because I can stand there all day, Ms. Binion can stand there all day, the trainers can stand there all day, but something that is, I feel, one of the most critical places of communication in any organization is a line level floor supervisor. When I was the closest boots on the ground, if I didn't carry a message to my troops the right way, it threw things off. Whether that was just my group that just couldn't carry it forward. So to be more specific, in the way that this is set up, supervisors have to take ownership and carry that message to their staff. There is a list, a checklist that's involved in proactive supervision, which you guys will see when we send it. And it's not assessment of workability. It is, was this conveyed? Did I say, hey, EPS, I need you to deliver the structure today? Everybody has to do it at some point. You got morning structure, you got afternoon structure, you have X, Y, and Z, whatever the task is. Was the task given? Was it completed? Was it demonstrated? Do I need to say, hey, we can improve here? What were the improvement points? So that is how the strategy within proactive supervision for how that's communicated to the staff and how they should be engaged. The other thing you asked was about notices to get people to come to work. So some of the strategies that have happened with that, people have said, well, we need an incentive, right? So at some point, probation actually gave an incentive, more than $17,000 per person for you to complete in excess of 2,000 hours in direct supervision of youth. We have tried alternative schedules. We have tried several different things. We can, again, speak with the staff. I know that with different sectors, maybe our unions, with staff, we can agree to disagree on how beneficial those points have been. But in doing that, we've done those things. So now you say, okay, if we've done them, even if we take a step back and revisit those things, what do we need to do to enhance the pool of people that we can get in the buildings to work to help us do what needs to be done?
Right.
Commissioner Terry.
Are there any, I guess, benchmarks that you all are setting for yourselves with the proactive supervision, the comprehensive violence reduction strategy, so that you kind of know that you're on the right track? What might those be? And then will there be other follow-ups with those key stakeholders, the line staff, the DMH, everyone, to get feedback as it's being implemented to know to what extent it's useful?
Yes, so the first big benchmark are there reduction in incidents? Are we seeing numbers go down in the number of physical altercations? The second, is there less graffiti? If we are all consistent across the board and we reduce that you can write with a permanent marker, we reduce how we issue pencils, has graffiti reduced? So reduction in the incidents that we have to respond to with use of force, or fights that we are able to address and mitigate. Also, PD, the incidents. Also, do people feel safer? And the thing I'll say about proactive supervision, unlike strategies that people often try in certain things, this is an ongoing strategy. Proactive supervision is not something that will go away. It's not, hey, we did this for 60 days, we did this for 90 days. If you will, it is a lifestyle thing that you have to be consistent on every day, that it has to be built into that. And there's constant revisiting. Are you using the tools of your proactive supervision? Have you identified as a team, supervisors, with your staff, options that they have? On the back end, as administrators, you're responsible for other things as well. So my responsibility is, when there's somebody that's so disruptive to the facility, is there something in place that people have as a tool, if properly documented, that they can use? Do you have administrative segregation to assess safety? I know I spoke with the court earlier this week. I'm not saying that we are going to do this at large, that we're going to have a run on these cases, but under WIC code, and I hope I'm not misciting it, under Welfare and Institution Code 208.5, if a youth is a chronic, persistent disruption to a facility, they cannot program, they're not able to meet the needs of those programs. If they're violent, if they're continuing to assault people, if they're continuing to assault staff, and there is a persistent pattern of this behavior, under 208.5, you can notify the court and make a recommendation. We cannot adequately maintain this individual in a juvenile setting if they're 19 years old or older. So one of the strategies that we intend to use in this is addressing all the way up to that level. Will this be immediate? No, because every youth under proactive supervision gets opportunities. These are the expectations. And again, this is not about perfection, but everybody, kids, staff, our partners, everybody in this facility has a reasonable expectation of safety. They have a reasonable, and this was stated to all of our youth that were talked to, has a reasonable expectation to be respected in that exchange and to be respectful. So this is an ongoing process. Our benchmarks are to see a reduction in graffiti, to see a reduction in the incidents that we're responding to see increased participation in programming, and I'll address that when we talk about the CAP, and increased engagement in all of the things that we do holistically in the facility, school, programming, and all of those things.
So maybe a couple more questions so we can get to the caps and then we can return to these questions. Commissioner Jackson?
Sure, thank you. I think one thing, I understand the supervisor's role in implementing the concept, and I think one thing that may be missing is just like bi-directional communication. If they're carrying the message, I'm just not really hearing what exactly is in place to collect the feedback from them. Like if you're trying to measure them feeling safe, like how are you exactly getting that information? And if they do not feel safe, like how do you go about addressing that?
So in proactive supervision, as I said, at the front end, as you start to roll this out and train people, including our support teams that work in the facility, LACO, mental health, healthcare services, you do what I described is the listening. What are your perceptions of safety? What are some concerns that you have in that? What are some issues, some concerns that you have in that? Part of proactive supervision requires that supervisors and directors, probably anywhere from an hour to 2 hours after the shift starts, they convene and they are pre-briefing. These are some things I'm seeing in the facility. These are some things that we're controlling. This hot zone, these are the issues here. At the end of the day, 30 to 45 minutes before the shift ends, they convene for a debrief to have information ready to pass on to the incoming team. In addition to that, there's benchmarks in proactive supervision where you have to go back and talk to the partners. Are you seeing any change in the first month? Are you seeing any change in 90 days? Are you seeing any change in 6 months? And that is continued. It's not just a new process. Every time there's a new partner that comes in that coincides with proactive supervision, there's a new safety orientation that every facility will do for every new partner. So that at each thing, and you add to that tool. These are some concerns. These are some things we've seen. This is what needs to happen in that. So it's a living, as Mr. Holmes, who developed proactive supervision, said, this is a living, breathing training. This is a living, breathing action, and input and takeaways are constantly happening.
Thank you for that.
Okay, thank you. So I will touch on the cap, and some things I'll jump around just to give general, and then once you guys want to ask questions. I know it's in here, but just to talk about it. So some things that we're looking at to talk about to ensure the kids are receiving programming. And again, I want to say there's been some challenges because of the staffing, but we're working around those things. So one thing that you'll see is an activities block. So some people are confused by that whole thing, like someone just called yesterday. What does it mean, activities block? That just means that in the morning, we have two groups, really. We have our general population of kids, and then we have our kids that have graduated. They're not in the high school program. So what needs to happen for those kids? Some kids go to their college programs that usually start at about 10, but maybe everybody isn't engaged in that. So from 9 o'clock to 10:30 in the facility, or 11 rather, we would have times to schedule activities within that block, programming. So we would have times to schedule within that block all morning programs for our graduate students. Because our other students are at school, we want that programming to be done for them before lunchtime, which is usually about 12. Then after school, at between 4 and 6 p.m., we would have the evening block of program. So throughout the facility, what's happening during those times is programming. So everybody would be scheduled in those blocks. It's easier to control. As you know, we've had some concerns raised about escorting people to programming, wait times. This will also help us to address those wait times and to have consistent blocks. I know what everybody's doing in these times. We can also schedule other things around those. In looking at the programming, we are also, I'll be talking with the Archdiocese of Los Angeles and other clergy either later today or tomorrow. And one thing was, hey, we need times that we can schedule in church services in the chapel. So on Saturdays and Sundays, we're asking for 2 days, 2 services. So the first would start at between 7:55 and 8:30, and then 8:35 to 9:10, around 9:15. And time is built in for escorting kids to the chapel and setting up a schedule in which units rotate to go into that chapel time. Our hope is to then be able to expand in some way to later services. Right now, we do things like have visiting only on Saturdays or Sundays. So it's difficult to meet a lot of the programming needs when all visiting is only on Saturdays and Sundays. But there are ways that facilities can manage broadening visitation time to the weekdays. And what does that schedule look like? So we're working on different things that will support the activities block of time and habit. Standardizing the sign-in sheet, we've already had that, but one thing that it didn't have, because we revised it to come into compliance with the Big 11, as I say, is it didn't have a signature block for the supervisor or the senior. So now you have to sign off that you actually checked that, saw that. The unit supervisor verifying during their rounds. As I said, we've changed some things within the facility, and each campus now has each unit's different things to get more leadership into the buildings. That is our facility directors. Every campus has an assistant director, and they have several supervisors, seniors, and line level floor staff, if you will, that are in the units. In addition to those things, we're also pulling different programs so that if somebody is late or somebody doesn't show up for their programming, what are some things that we can have if you say in the can that staff can pull from handouts to activities that they can provide in place of those things if there's a need for them to. We're incentivizing the programming. If you take a look, and I'll talk separately about the matrix, but we're incentivizing the programming. We also have now activities and program coordinators. So we eventually hope to roll this out to all of our facilities. And at LP, we have 2 activities probation coordinators assigned. They are full-time. Their offices are in the process of being finished. They will be co-located with our education staff. And I'll get into a little bit of what they do because there is an activities and programs coordinator roles and responsibilities list, which is attached to this. The activities coordinators, kids told Ms. Binion when we walked around, talked to kids, they are sick of surveys. One kid said, I will not do another survey the whole time I'm here, and if I come back, I'm not doing another survey. I can live with that. But what they were interested in doing is talking about what they're concerned about, what they would like to see for programming. So part of what's in the CAP is town halls held with leadership, decision makers with our youth. And those have been completed. And taking that information, as I talked about a couple months ago, was our LP advisory group. We've had 5 people complete the background for that. I believe we're only awaiting 4 people to complete the background. And we'll have a meet and greet with the chief, the kickoff for them October something. We are going to ask that we start on some work before the formal kickoff because we have enough people in place with what we heard yesterday on the numbers that have passed background to start doing the work. So part of our CAP says that anything that's received in the town halls, we will discuss with our LP advisory group to receive recommendations. And they do represent people from across all sectors that deal with youth, mental health, homelessness. We have a credible messenger. So we have people that can say, hey, have you guys thought of this? So we changed some of the other things, the CCTV, which is the video monitoring system for supervisors to look at that system to see that programming is going on, or to say, hey, I'm seeing this, this looks a little light. What's the problem that's going on there? And then, of course, the meeting with the superintendent and probation directors, in which she's doing follow-up with these groups as well. So the CCTV, probation directors have it. We have this placed recently on all of the desktops. That had been something that hadn't been in place before. So we were heavily dependent on one or two people knowing how to observe videos on that system and being able in one room. But now it's available to all of the facility directors in real time. So they can actually go in and take a look at the videos or things they need to look at. And it's not only very helpful for monitoring our activity, but also taking a look at incidents when we're reviewing use of forces. Then, of course, trainings, where I said we're going to have people, or when there's gaps, staff that are able to do some things with those things. And then an evaluation period to ensure that it's the integrity of our corrective action plan. Will continue to closely monitor and immediately address, correct any deficiencies discovered after the above steps have been taken. The next thing I'll go through is, so as attached, there is the activities and program coordinators' roles and responsibilities, dated July 30th, 2024. So it just generally goes through. I'll go to some of these. I won't read all of the duties that they have, just some highlights. Coordinators will liaison with community program providers to support the planning of programs, special activities, and events. So they have called all of our program providers to verify the calendar for September. Some people have already said, hey, well, can I change this? They are also asking, can we put you into the block? If people can allow or accommodate that with their current schedule. So asking for that. They determine what programs are needed, where's the gaps. They're not controlling contracts or writing the contracts, but hey, we need a space in here. We have this time open for that. They track the progress of the program MOUs, not like contract monitoring, but hey, are these people, are Kim and Eric here, these are the agency contacts, is their number up to date? This is when it says you can come into the facility, the time, and then our backgrounds people are sending in real time, hey, this is a notice to you, Kim Epps is cleared to come into the facility. If they send another notice, it goes to the activities coordinator to say this person's clearance was rescinded. So to have a file for every single program that comes into the facility. So this is a one source method of having all of that in one place. And the last thing I'll discuss, they also recruit youth to participate in the LP youth councils. We did discover that some units did not have youth council representation. And it needs to be every single unit. So they recruit youth to participate in that, in the youth councils. And then always the big one that you throw in everything, other duties as assigned, right? That's where they get you. So when I talk about some of we added in programs matrix, this is different than the behavior management program, BMP or DSS that you hear about at Barry J. Because we want to encourage kids to get the maximum benefit from programming. It's at those moments that you can start to spark a change there. And if we're able to get to a place where we can have transitional programming, that it starts here in the facility, and then there's something in the community that you transition to post-release. So some of the incentives for level one, minimal participation, recognize efforts to participate. You'll see that at the top of every single place in this incentive, because it is a big thing sometimes for some of our people to just show up. Because people have different feelings when you are in detention, no matter grown or a kid, right? You have certain feelings about that. And depression runs high, needs run high, different things. So showing up is big, and we reward that every time. Verbal praise, small tangible awards, paperbacks, bookmarks, healthy snacks, writing journals, toiletries. Level 2 is your moderate progress or participation in programs. Certificate of accomplishment, symbolic awards, fabric medals, kudos, tiny certificates, copies of teen-specific addiction reading materials as necessary, posted accomplishments like high performer on the unit, shouting you out in that way, displaying artwork. Level 3 is your moderate progress. Special order books or magazines one time that you get while you're there. You get to read them first. Earn special activities for your unit. Cornhole tournament, movie passes. How does that work if you're in the compound? We can bring in, hey, we can do a movie night. We can have a concession stand. We can bring out the outside screen. So those things, spa nights, kick it and sip, just twisting on the word. Soft blankets, reduce unit restrictions, later times to your room, extra phone time. Level 4,
I'm sorry, Ms. Epps. I think most people can go ahead and look at
Okay.
those. Just, if you can just close up with on the caps.
yeah, so that's all for the cap. That's what's in our cap. We believe this, we know it can be achieved. Most people say, well, someone said it seems aggressive, but these are not new things. These are things that we've done in other jurisdictions, that have been done in other jurisdictions, clearly workable. But it's impacted by staffing, but we're moving along.
So,
Thank you.
yeah, no, thank you. So before we go on to commissioner questions, if we can just get a quick synopsis on the spot checks at Berry J.
So the spot checks is what you mean from our BSCC.
Mhm.
So those are targeted and focused. When they come in to do the inspections, they're a targeted focus. So there's the announced and unannounced. So for the months of June, the announced spot checks or inspection and the unannounced focused on programming at both facilities. And it's the same, no findings at Berry J, and what I discussed from the PowerPoint at LP, the cap regarding programming. For July, the spot check focus was staffing. And the results that I discussed, no findings at Berry J, and we have a cap due for staffing October 11th for the finding at LP regarding staffing.
Thank you. Commissioners, Commissioner Meredith.
This is more of a comment than it is a question. First of all, I like the concept of the proactive supervision. And when you're talking about the kid lighting up or tagging up his clothing and sitting down and talking to him, being an old gang cop, that's a very effective thing, especially when you learn how to develop respect and rapport with these youth. That leads into the fact that we have many, many staff that are outstanding at interacting with the youth. And somehow we need to correlate those people with the newer ones coming in. But going back to proactive supervision, I'm going to take it back that we also need to have proactive supervision by the supervisors in that they're actually being held accountable for their operations. And then to staff, they do a great job. The majority of them are showing up. However, those that are not showing up because they're too scared to show up, I'm not sure why, because I walk those facilities and either they feel sorry for the old man or nobody ever gives me grief. But if you're too scared to come to work, and I hate when I say this, find another occupation. But those that do come to work, I do value and appreciate you.
Thank you. Commissioner Canales.
Yes, mine is also more of a comment. I appreciate the action plan. I believe in your vision for programs. I do think for those that are saying it can't be done, I absolutely believe that it can be done, and I've also seen, and any way that I could support as a commissioner, I'm on board. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Jackson.
Yes, thank you. I do have more of a question. I'll start by saying I appreciate how much this sort of, not how much it captures, but the engagement that it requires from the youth and the fact that you guys solicit feedback through the town halls. I think that that is going to be very helpful in executing on some of the goals here, as long as you guys make that an ongoing effort, very important. One thing that I did think about, though, when it comes to the in the can, I don't know what the in the can really entails, but I'm curious when you guys have staffing shortages and you're wondering how you can continue to sort of facilitate the programming, if you've ever considered empowering the youth to leadership roles and allowing them to facilitate programs as well. You know, when I was in the halls, for people who don't know, I'm one of the commissioners with lived experience. I've been in Berry J, Central, LP. I've been at all of the facilities, and I would say that if we're talking about maximizing the benefit, sometimes it helps to not only engage, but empower you to be a part of the solution and training them to be able to facilitate the program, gives them leadership abilities, discipline, teaches them structure, responsibility, and you could benefit from identifying youth who could help you in that way too. So
Thank you.
Hey, no further questions. Wendy, do we have any written or live public comments?
I believe we did not receive any written public comments on this. If there's anyone in the audience who would like to make public comment, please approach the podium. If you'd like to make comments and you're participating via WebEx, use the little raise your hand function. It's a little hand button at the bottom of the screen. If you are calling in, you need to dial *3 and we'll call you by your phone number. And we'll start with 2 minutes. Are we going to be able to put the timer up on the screen? Jennifer's going to put the timer up on the screen. Go ahead, Mr. Bell.
Thank you. I just want to comment on, I believe, like 3 points. One, what Mr. Merritt was talking about, the morality for promotions. I would say offer it to us first before you just get laterals from other places, because you may not find too many people who want to move up and be supervisors at LP, but the fact that you offered it shows at least some type of care and concern, and the fact that you want to allow it. You know, I've been in the same position for 10 years. You know, there's a lot of people who's been in the same spot for even longer. So promotions in this department don't really come very often. So I would offer, if you're going to bring in supervisors, hire more supervisors, offer it to us first for those who've been waiting for a long time. Also incentives, like Ms. Jackson brought up. You know, the money thing was okay for a while. You know, I know a lot of people who actually went and did it, but we need to offer other things too. You know, for people who are constantly showing up, constantly being there, and people will say, well, they're just there doing their job. You know, not every job you're gonna go in to work and get punched on. Not every job you go to work and get spit on. Not every job requires a 60-year-old grandmother to restrain an 18-year-old grown man. So yes, so incentives does help. Letting them know that they're doing a good job helps. You know, we could throw out, we don't have much time now, but we could throw out ideas. You know, if you come to our union meetings or, you know, you talk to one of us, we could throw out ideas of how to have weather incentives and bring people. And as far as bringing people to work, safety, that easy fix, safety. If you get people feeling safe, I am not going to agree that they're scared to come to work. We're going to disagree on that, but they need to feel safe. If they're able to come to work and a fight breaks out and you're able to separate that young man from the group for a bit of time instead of bringing him right back so he can fight again, that's a problem right there. If we're not able to do that, then it just stirs up more. And the other kids see it and they say, time's up.
It is, sorry.
Oh.
It's a really calm but beeper. We're keeping it de-escalated in the beeper room today. Thanks, Mr. Bell. Please go ahead.
Good morning, Tanya Ibanez from Hang Out Too Good. One of the things that I think needs to be addressed is the plan to reduce the population. I did go to juvenile court the other day, and I witnessed a scenario where a youth, had been arrested. He was kept over during the weekend. He had no priors. Never had any problems. He was involved in apparently attempting to purchase stolen property, and he had a gun on him, so that was not good. But he never had any other problems with law. His parents came to court from Utah. They wanted to take him home. He had admitted to the police officer that he had a gun in his satchel. He was cooperative during his stay I think it was in Los Padrinos. Never had any problems before. And during his stay at Padrinos over the weekend, he was well behaved. So there were no problems with him. And yet the probation officer recommended that he be detained. And this is a perfect example where he shouldn't have been detained. He should have been released to his parents. This shouldn't have been an issue. And yet, you know, here the parents are being dragged into court, having to beg the judge to please allow them to take their kid home. So, I mean, I do think that if if supervision is taking into consideration prior, whether the child has had any other problems, you will be able to reduce your population. The other thing that I'm concerned about is, again, there seems to be a vicious cycle. People aren't coming to work because they don't feel they're safe, but on the other hand, by not coming into work, they're creating an unsafe environment for their coworkers. So when I worked at DOJ, if you were out of work for 3 days, you had to come in with a doctor's note. And I'm hoping that you can implement something like this as well. Employees definitely have the right to take sick leave, but they should have a doctor's note.
Thank you.
Hi, Helen Eigenberg. Thank you, Ms. Ebbs, for all the information. Just a couple quick questions, and pardon my naivete. I'm learning about a lot of all of this. But as I've said before, I work with teens on a daily basis. I teach sex ed in the LAUSD. Working with teens is very different. And so I'm just curious, and maybe you've addressed this before, but how much training are we giving to staff in the ways that we work with teens? Because it's a really different population, and they're amazing, and they're really tough at times. And so, and plus on top of it, we're dealing with kids with trauma. So I guess if you could maybe address that just really quickly for me. And I also feel I've been coming to the POC meetings for a while now, and we continuously hear staff not showing up. So it seems while we are in this crisis, reducing the population, and for those who don't need to stay there, even if it's 10% that can go, or it's 20 or 30, I don't know the data there, but getting kids who don't need to be there home with their families or somewhere else where they are safe seems like what we need to be doing right now. And then my last question is credible messengers. Last time I was here, there was they were not being allowed to get in. They were waiting on approval. Have we made progress with that? Are they able to get in? Thank you.
Okay, that's the end of public comment in the room. And so far, we don't have any hands up online. So I think we will go back.
Commissioners? Commissioner Terry.
Is it possible to get a response, I think, for a couple of the questions that were raised?
I'm just going to ask on one of the questions, Commissioner Terry, about the clearances. That is the next agenda item. So if we could wait on that one until your report. But on the first question, I think, was regarding the training that's received on adolescent behavior. Is that right?
So we do provide staff with training, trauma-informed care, all of these things through our training department. But one thing that we've looked at is we did an expanded training plan that has been approved by BSCC, and add into it all of our electives. So there'll be additional over and above training, also training people to deliver some of the programs and things that go along with that sensitivity as you know, when you're teaching people, how that's delivered makes a big difference. So training for that as well. In regards to reducing, I'll go to the big question, reducing the population. So we have put forward a detention reduction plan. We've started those conversations with the court. We've started those conversations with our partners. But one big thing that has happened in looking at the cases, I see the same thing that you're talking about with this, say, the receiving stolen property. So one thing, under the code, you're allowed to have a home supervision program. That's the release on electronic monitoring. And I want to say it's like 685, WNI 685 lays out when the description for when that can happen. So we have, just this morning, I was talking with Ms. Vest and said, hey, can you take a look at about 60 cases? Because I believe that we have cases that meet this criteria, but we are underutilizing home supervision. And any action, in my email, I have to send her, outside of our conversation though, any action that needs to be taken to bring those cases back to court needs to happen. And then the other thing with that is going forward, we have a capacity in our electronic monitoring program for upwards of 600 kids to be on electronic monitoring at any time in the community. And that's significant in comparison to how many kids are in custody. So kids, just like you're talking about, can be placed on electronic monitoring. It can't happen out of state, unfortunately, but we have options to do that. So starting today, people are going to be looking more closely at those cases. We were actually literally just talking about that. And going forward, that will be the rule of thumb. So that's what we're doing most urgently to address it. And then we'd like to, if we can, agendize for the next meeting to talk about our reduction plan that we're moving forward with the program.
We look forward to that. Commissioner Jackson?
Yeah, I want to know kind of what the underlying principle is to the detention reduction plan. Advocates, commissioners, we have our ideals, but for probation, what's the premise of that plan?
Well, there's a couple things. So if you had like a data-driven or evidence-based informed concept of who's in custody, for example, if you take a kid that has no prior history and what they have, and I'm not minimizing anything where the community's victimized or there's a problem. But if I've never been in custody and now you have me here for receiving property, the more time you spend in detention with higher level offenders, the more influence for that comes your way, right? The other thing is, a lot of times you will see kids taken out of school, their homeschool, put in the detention school, awaiting the court process. So I've disrupted your school time. I haven't given you the benefit to comply with probation, to show that you're amenable to doing these things in the community based upon the offense. We have a wholesale way here in Los Angeles, from what I've been able to read and what I've been able to research in the cases, of a one for all, everybody gets the same. And we need to do better in assessing suitability for detention against the risk for community and against the risk to the kid poses to themselves. And the more quickly we connect a kid in the right environment, if that's a recommendation for you to go home and to be supervised, the more quickly we can engage you through the probation supervision process and engage the family for better outcomes to get you off of probation. So that's our motivation.
Commissioner, did you have a follow-up,
I
Commissioner?
just wanted to say thank you. It shares that we're on the same page in some way.
Commissioner Meredith?
I just want to clarify something. When I talk about fear, I get the text messages, people say, I'm too scared to go in there. The reality of it is, if you had people coming to work, you'd have more staff there, it'd be less dangerous. And I happen to have about 40 years of experience working in high-risk environments, so I understand that concept. But if you're not at work, that endangers your peers. That's what I was talking about, Mr. Bell.
So I'm just going to share a little data that we can explore at the next agenda item with your reduction plan. But yes. Okay. So on July 31st, well, not July 31st, a few days after, we received a snapshot data of the kids that were detained at Los Padrinos Juvenile Hall. The number of kids detained for pre-dispo were 308. Out of that 308, 183 were identified as active investigation or new. That means that they were not on any type of formal probation supervision. That means, it doesn't mean that they didn't have any priors. They could have had a prior and then they committed another crime. But it does mean that they were not on probation. Out of the 183, 96 were under 16 years of age. That population that probation is expert at working with. Out of those, only 44 were 707Bs. The more restrictive opportunities to release, which means that 52 of those were, and this is just the population under 16. So, you know, there's plenty of youth that are actually detained right now that actually can be detained on house arrest if properly assessed. So that just gives you an idea of what the population looks like and the opportunities we do have, and with the ability of 600 kids to be under CDP and with DYD as a partner, we have the ability for the judges and the courts to have a finding that there are programs in the community, which include CDP and DYD and a multitude of CBOs that all of our communities have. So that's just some food for thought that we can explore at our next meeting.
The slide that Chair Mundo is just sharing is actually listed on the agenda under item number 7. I'm looking at agenda 6, item number 6. So if you want to see the numbers, they are listed under item number 6 and supporting documents.
Okay, now we're going to move on to agenda item 4. We will discuss and take possible action, including a formal request for information regarding reports from the Probation Oversight Commission's ad hoc committees. We will first hear from Wendy Julian, who will give a verbal presentation on commissioner recruitment.
Thank you. I will be very brief. I just want to say thank you to everyone who has applied for this position. We have gone through all the applications and honestly, it's going to be a very difficult decision. I'm glad that I don't have to make it. And we're now entering into the process of interviewing candidates for the at-large position. Just as a reminder, there is only one at-large commission position open. It's the position vacated by Commissioner Garcia-Lays. The other two open positions are supervisorial appointees who will be hopefully shortly appointed by Supervisors Horvath and Solis. And so at the next POC meeting, if not before, at a special meeting, we expect for the leadership committee to bring to the full commission the suggestion of a couple of candidates who the full POC will then vote on.
Is it too late for me to join that committee?
It's not that it's too late. It's that we can't have another member of the committee, is my understanding.
Food for thought. When this commission was originally formed.
Can you talk in the mic? Thank you.
When this commission was originally formed, the 5 district appointees reviewed all the applicants, and then all the applicants, they were rated, and then they came before all the commission to be voted on, not just a couple. So I'm just tossing that out for a suggestion, and we should go back to the original format.
Well, we would only have 3 right now.
The POC at the last meeting voted on the process. So if you wanted to vote on another process, you could do so, but there was a vote at the last POC meeting to.
That was for an
accept
ad
this
hoc
process.
committee. I'm just
Yes.
pointing out what the original process was. We should go to it because the leadership team, while they're going through these things, we may not have a chance to see something. We may have input on some of those candidates that those 3 people in that ad hoc don't have.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to give a brief presentation on the new crime filings ad hoc. So we met with Chief Epps and for an hour and reviewed the draft. She took it back with her and her team and recently sent us a copy of the updated draft. We are reviewing it and we will respond with any concerns or questions or comments. And I think we may meet one more time and iron out the last details. And then I believe that they will be ready to formalize it. And so that's where we are with the crime filing ad hoc. So Commissioner Terry will give a verbal on the CBO relationships ad hoc.
All right, well, we formed the ad hoc committee really to get a better understanding of what programming experiences are like across the different facilities, both in terms of probation's perspective about the future of programming, but also what CBOs are actually experiencing. And so since we formed, a few activities have taken place. We've had 2 meetings with probation leadership just to get an understanding of some of the questions that commonly come up in this space, particularly related to background checks, clearance processes, communication. And so in those meetings, we've gotten some sense, I'll say an initial sense about the contracting process. And more specifically, we've been able to learn what the department has in place, some of which has been presented today in terms of appointing specific people to oversee programming at each facility, the ongoing plans through the town halls to assess where there are gaps in services. And so we've gotten a sense of that vision. And again, some of that has been shared today. To complement that, we also held a closed listening session town hall last week with CBOs who are currently providing services. And we had representation from providers at all facilities. So there were 20 providers who attended. And we've learned more about what their specific experiences have been like. And so we will provide a more formal update shortly, but I did want to share at least some of the themes that came out of that town hall because it was really, it was very productive conversations. And so I'll start with the positives, which is that There were several providers who said they've actually been having a relatively smooth experience, and they did really highlight the work with probation staff, specifically those in the unit, and really being able to have that collaboration and that being so essential to being able to get in the door. Others said that they have not had challenges with clearance, but in particular, the reason why they haven't had challenges is because there is a point person at the facility who's really been able to step in to make sure when there's questions, they're immediately resolved. And so in those conversations, they were kind of pointing to what's working, which I think we can learn from. And others shared that they recognize how hard the unit staff are working. So when they do come and there's been a change, there's been a shuffle, they recognize that as a provider, they have to adjust. And so they were also very proud to share that they don't cancel. They show up, and if they're not able to provide services, it's not because they weren't there. In terms of where there's room for improvement, and I think where our committee will really be looking to kind of push recommendations has to do with there are still a number of providers who are having challenges with clearances. Everything from I show up, I thought I was clear, I'm told I'm not clear, and some of the mistreatment that occurs within that and the way that that's communicated to them if they're not clear. And so that continues to be a persistent problem for many. There is also a lot of providers spoke about the general climate from staff in terms of how they're received. So some described it as a combative energy, disrespected by staff, in particular those who feel like they do come in with that lived experience and they feel like they might be treated differently compared to people on their team who aren't formally incarcerated. And so they felt like that kind of hampered their ability to come in and provide services. Generally, sometimes people felt like I'm seen as a burden or a nuisance rather than a collaborative member of the team who's here to support youth and staff. And they also talked about, in some instances, staff serving as gatekeepers almost. So I can't come in and do my program, or I'm told that no youth want to participate versus me being able to engage with the youth directly to find out if they're interested in participating. And then last, I'll just speak to the ongoing challenges with providing programs in a space where there's music, TVs, phone being used in the background, and just how challenging that is. And I think they definitely felt like they try to work around that, but it is, it's unproductive sometimes for program delivery. And then last, I will share that, again, people spoke about the differences across facilities, in particular Barry J. People really speaking to the shifts that have taken place there. And so they feel like they're having a positive experience there, delivering their programs in ways that they are not at LP, for example. So in terms of next steps, like I said, we will be formalizing these recommendations, sharing them out to everyone who attended, to the board, to probation. And then as a committee, we'll be meeting again to really determine how to kind of hone in on some of those recommendations that have come out of these activities and how to continue working with probation around them.
Commissioner Terry, commissioners, any questions or comments?
Well, I'm just curious, based on her report back, Ms. Epps, I'm wondering if you know what the difference in treatment might be attributed to when it comes to the different facilities. I mean, I don't know how representative that is, but I just want to know if you have any thoughts on that.
I asked that question to Mr. Rayleigh earlier and he had a great answer.
I have no official response in the public forum, sir.
Okay.
All right, Ms. Epps.
So clearly, we will check into that. Everyone should be treated as we are messaging to our kids, messaging to our staff. Everyone should be treated with dignity and respect. There are ways to say no. There are ways to have disagreements that are perfectly amicable, right, in the conversation. So any of those I'm always concerned about because I believe respect is paramount. So I will look into those things. I will find out, the notices for backgrounds, all of these things. We'll look into it. I prefer to give a broader response once we have the report back from the POC and then see what direction you guys want us to take in responding to that so we can do it. But in the interim, I'll look into what I'm hearing here so we can start doing some.
I would just
work.
add, if the more you standardize the process around some of that stuff, the more you can eliminate the difference in treatment. So maybe standardization is part of this.
I agree.
Commissioners? The one comment I will make as a former probation officer is that the institutions are really different. And at Los Padrinos, the turnover is daily and it's high. And on top of that, you have the staffing issues. But when you get to the secure U track or you get to the camps, you have less turnover and a smaller populations. So that's one of the reasons that I would see might be the reason for the disparities in services and how things are administered. So
Even if the interactions are like limited to like staff, it's less about like the program and more about like the process of like accessing the facility, right?
well, that's different, but
Okay.
just in general, just
Okay.
providing services. So
Okay, thank you for that.
oh, and
Before we go to public comment, which I think is what's next, I want to go back to the commissioner recruitment question. I have just gotten Commissioner Mundo's support in talking to county council over the next couple of days about the possibility of sharing the applications with the full commission, even though the decision-making about who will come back would be from the committee. So I'll get back to you on the answer to that. I don't want to put them on the spot right now about that, but I hear you. And I think that's a valuable suggestion. Thank
That
you
would be
both.
great.
perfect. Do we have any live, public, or written comment?
No written public comment on this agenda item. Is there anyone who'd like to make public comment on any of the three ad hoc committees? We have one commenter online. I don't see anybody in the room. Who have we got online? Did you already tell me and I haven't looked? Karina. Okay, great. Karina, we're going to unmute you and we'll give you 2 minutes. Thanks for coming today. Karina, you may have to unmute yourself as well.
I believe I had you on Bluetooth. I'm sorry. Can you hear
Okay, we can hear you now. You can begin.
Okay, I just wanted to add to what was said. I agree with you know, just the atmosphere when you go to LP, it's very I, I don't know what the right word would be, but it just from entering that place to when, I used to see my son there and I used to walk in, and once I would just walk into that place, it's this attitudes and this, and you feel like you yourself are a inmate. And it's horrible because it's just there. I've gone to camps, I've gone to Berry, and the atmosphere is so different. Their attitudes is different. The staff is helpful. It's just a different environment. So I would say that a lot of the kids go by of attitudes. I mean, if I felt attitude and if I had attitude from a staff at LP and an adult, it's very disturbing to think of they would talk to my kid like. So that's something that you need to maybe take into consideration. If I'm a grown woman and another grown adult is speaking to me in a very, rude or just awful, demeaning way, it puts me in a state of mind where I'm like, okay, how would they talk to the kids then if you talk to me like that? So, you could tell the difference, and it's just LP, that it's something about LP. I don't know if it's the staff, they're overworked, but that needs to change, and it should change.
Thank you, Karina. Thank you for being here. We do have 2 commenters in the room, so we're going to go to public comment in the room.
Good morning, I'm Tyreek. I'm with the Anti-Recidivism Coalition. I just want to express that we need some type of confidentiality when it comes to that CBO town hall, because in the past, back in the day, before the POC was a thing, and it was just a PRIT, For us, at least for ARC, our members used to show up and they used to give public comment all the time. But when that happened, some of our members ended up facing retaliatory methods, right? They getting their houses raided, they getting their house busted in, and we don't want that to be a thing. And I know that we in a different administration now of probation, but we don't want that retaliatory thing that when those organizations who program come in, that they aren't facing retaliatory methods because of they wanted to express their concerns for certain things inside the department. So I just wanted to express that there needs to be some type of confidentiality, but I think it is something that does need to be public, but not who's there per se. Thank you.
Thank you, Tyreek. Diane, do you want to address that?
Yeah, just to clarify, it was a closed session and even who was able to attend was highly vetted. And in some instances, people who weren't directly in the facilities were asked to not attend. No names, and it was not recorded. It was not that type of space. And even the recommendations that come out of that will be anonymous. I think our subcommittee is very taking a lot of care and attention to make sure that anything we share is not going to be able to be tied back to a person. And there were people who were very concerned about even coming or maybe just shared a comment via email for that very reason. So I think we want to be mindful of that as well. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I do want to say thank you, Tyreek, for the comment. If there's anybody, I'm going to say the same thing I said when I brought up the ombudsman issue, then we need to reach out to our ombudsman. I will again ask POC to provide that information so we can get a citizen's complaint form, because at no time are we in our department condoning anything that may have happened that people are perceiving as any type of retaliation. That is not how we work. So if these incidents are occurring, we want to hear about them and we want to give anybody in the public an opportunity to be properly heard, for those to be properly addressed through the appropriate referral, review, and/or investigation if necessary. So I please encourage any member of the public that feels that you are experiencing this to make the necessary referral. And that goes for anything, prior comments for unfair hiring, anything that people are perceiving that's happening. If these things are occurring, they need to stop, because that is not how we do business. And we want a chance to address those things and make the necessary actions known. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Isabella and I'm with the Anti-Recidivism Coalition, and I just have a small, I guess you could say, opinion suggestion towards what you were saying about the report. If the people there to give the programming are already there, why not give them the opportunity to speak to the young folks, to let them know, hey, we're here, we're going to give this program, please come join. Because me personally, and I think we could all relate to this at some point in our life, having someone who we sadly already have a preset opinion of, like, no, I'm not going to do anything you tell me, and then having someone who you don't know, getting a fresh feel for them, hey, come do this program. It's about this and this and this. And then if they still don't want to, then what can you do? But at least give them the opportunity, push for that, because they're already cleared, they're already there. Might as well give them the chance. Thank you.
Thanks, Isabella. We do have one online commenter, so we'll go back to Elida Ledesma online. Elida, you can unmute yourself. We're going to unmute you.
Good morning. My name is Elida Ledesma. I'm the Executive Director of the Arts for Healing and Justice Network. And one question I had for Ms. Epps is also in terms of the security at the front of the facilities. A lot of our members and organizations that we support report to us sort of the challenges with the security guards at the gate, sort of racial profiling, being very militaristic, having, being very aggressive and unwelcoming to the facilities. But when we try to bring this up to probation, they've let us know repeatedly that they have no accountability mechanism over the security guards. And so just curious in terms of what can be done to implement a sort of accountability for the guards at the front, training, sort of what that process is, or just gain more clarity around what is probation actually able to do or not do in terms of the guards at the front gate. Thank you.
Hi, I believe you said your last name's Ledesma, Miss Ledesma. Thank you for asking that. So I will say this, I need specific examples of where these concerns are. For example, when I say specific example, I've received things where people say, hey, I was searched inappropriately, right? And then we will follow up, and there were things. I've had people say I'm not submitting to the search. So across the board, everyone, employees, myself, everyone, all of us, I'm an employee too, but we all submit to that. But if I can get very specific examples and dates, we can look into those things. We do have the facility requirement to pass security because of the contraband issues that we have been having. I am not stating that anybody is responsible for that, but what I am saying is we put those measures in place to address it across the board. And the expectation is the same for our partners that come into the facility, for the public, for the employees. The chief himself is not immune from it. Everybody goes through the security check. But we have addressed concerns that have been brought to us and looked into those concerns. Even if you want to email them directly to the POC and they can get that information into me, we want to look at any specific concerns that are being raised. I've had some, but not what I'm hearing indicated. So if you could do that, Ms. Ledesma, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
And I would just echo that we're perfectly willing to be the conduit to forward those to you and to the ombudsman's office if we receive those detailed concerns.
And the last thing I would say is, I know that our Chief Safety Officer, Eric Strong, is very diligent on the direction that he's given our safety personnel and his follow-up and the attention that he gives to anything. So please, as I asked, just send us and we will get on top of that as well.
Thank you. I think we should go ahead and move on to agenda item 5. And for agenda item 5, we will be discussing and taking possible action, including a formal request for information on a report from the Los Angeles County Probation Department on use of force incidents with the focus on Los Perdinos Juvenile Hall. I also encourage you to read the OIG's recent report on use of force. Senior Probation Director Eric Rayleigh, thank you for joining us. Please proceed with your presentation.
Thank you for having me here today. I have the report here. First, I just wanted to say thank you briefly to the commissioners who conducted the tour of Barry J. Nydorf on August 29th, including Commissioners Jackson and Terry. It was great to speak with you that day. Regarding the use of force, so we have the attachments, I believe, up. I don't know if you want to put them up. What we have here is a data from January through June. And specifically looking at Los Padrinos, we can see the numbers, but I do want to say that numbers start the story, but they are not the story. And the department is already engaged in analyzing the data to make informed decisions that can then be made regarding the uptick, for example, in April. What occurred? Was it one particular youth that had numerous fights, or was it numerous youth? Was there a situation that occurred in the community? So some of the things, when you look at numbers, again, they start the story, but they don't tell the whole story. And so that's where the department is going to figure out what occurred and how to ensure that the numbers decrease in the future. Oh, we can go up on the screen. Okay. Okay.
Senior Director Rayleigh, if I could ask you on the other graph that is, these are uploaded to the agenda so people can look at them. That is the Barry J numbers. I believe that this is actually incorrect at the end, because it looks to me like these are the numbers of incidents and then there is a total column and the total is indicated on the graph. Can you confirm for me that I am interpreting that correctly?
Yeah, so you have the total column at the end there after June. And so that would show the difference. There will there'll almost always be a difference between the higher number of physical interventions versus or OC spray.
What I'm trying to suggest is that if a member of the public were looking at this graph,
Oh,
they
they
should
would-
draw a line
Right.
down June
Right, right.
to see
Yeah.
the trends, that the
Right.
trend did not go up
That-
after June.
That is correct. That's
Thank
the
you.
total number there at the end.
Thank you.
And
It actually is not reflected on the Los Padrinos graph. The Los Padrinos graph, I think, correctly ends in June. So you can see the trend lines. There's no spike at the end.
Right.
I just want to make sure folks who are looking at this from the
Didn't
public
think
are
there was a
reading
huge
it
jump at the
correctly.
end.
Thank you.
That is correct. Thank you.
Okay, and then also this, which side
There's
are
a
we on
typo.
now? Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed that as well. And on the Detention Services Bureau, the OC incident should actually be, they missed the 8 at the end. So it should, instead of 22, it should actually be 228.
228.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions, concerns? Commissioner Meredith?
I'm trying to read the chart here, and it says intervention, physical intervention incidents, total uses of force. I'm trying to differentiate what the difference is.
So most agencies, as you know, Mr. Meredith, if you have to intervene in any type of incident, right, it's just called use of force. If you physically intervene to push kids apart, might not be a higher level because there's firm grips, there's bumps, there's all of these things. But LA County probation across the board calls those physical interventions. But I, in my mind, have always been trained, what are the use of forces? What are the firm grips? What is the physical intervention that you use? And not call it physical intervention. So the two are interrelated.
Well, I would go with that, but I'm going to go with post standards. Post standards says handcuffing or any physical intervention is considered use of force, period. And I'm just kind of confused by when it says intervention and use of force. And, you know, because I got 800 total uses of force, 572 interventions.
Yes, but it does include cuffing all ranges of the levels in the continuum.
Right. I think if we do a report, we should break it out to what
Okay.
an explanation of use of force is, especially for the public. Because when public hears use of force, they're thinking, we're wrestling around on the ground. They're not realizing that by policy and law, if simply restraining somebody is considered use of force.
Okay, so what you're asking is the breakout from use of force. So I will say, we're going to start a new use of force review process beginning next week. And I will tell you that cuffing is not one that, hey, this use of force. For us, it's how you're intervening in the physical fight up to the use of OC. So I can certainly go back to see how it's documented when cuffs went on because you're required under Title 15 when restraints were applied, when they came off. So we will look at that, but I can tell you as just a wholesale way, it's not something cuffing that is tracked in the continuum. We can
Okay.
get it through reports, hand count, so we will work on that.
Okay, because in the post-learning domains, that is actually considered use of force. And I'd also like to suggest that if we're going to do this, we should put in here assaults on officers, so we have a flavor of, the type of activity.
Thank you.
Question.
Commissioner Jackson?
Sure. Can you refresh us on the policy and practice for de-escalating matters before physical intervention is required?
So we do have the crisis intervention team. So you're supposed to notify the crisis intervention team when a kid is out of control to do those interventions. I can tell you that the way that that is structured right now, it has staff on those teams. However, we're moving towards a process where we want to include others that are familiar with our kids in the facility on those teams, perhaps credible messenger, and use our deputy probation officer positions that we have, some that are social workers, licensed therapists, to put them on the team. So we are working on that. We're just not there yet with the resources to be able to do it, or I should say this, to roll that out with other things that are happening. And then, so there's that, to call in the crisis intervention team when time permits or allows. But I can tell you that with the incidents that we're seeing, our physical altercations between youth, we still continue to have, maybe not as high as it had been, what we call the pack outs, multiple youth attacking one youth. Sometimes we have unprovoked attacks against staff. A staff could be trying to mediate a situation, and it is not uncommon for a kid to respond by trying to take a swing at the staff, kicking the staff, or gassing, which is spitting on the staff. So those do not allow for the crisis intervention. You could have been working up to that in the counseling point, but it doesn't always allow for it. But whenever possible, we do notify our crisis intervention team.
Thank you for that. The reason why I'm asking the question is because during my inspection at Barry J about a week ago, I was reviewing grievances, and one grievance in particular was concerning to me. And so I requested to see the footage because I really wanted to see how the incident unfolded. And while watching the video, it was clear that the youth was being pushy. I don't think they deserved for the physical intervention, but I think the most important thing about the incident overall is in doing the investigation, I learned that the youth just 1 week prior had experienced a pretty traumatic event relating to his home life. And the reason why the situation escalated between the staff member and the youth is because the youth was simply trying to follow up on a court recommendation to visit with his family, and he was deprived of the opportunity, or at least of an update, to know when he could look forward to seeing his family. And so that incident escalated after he followed up about this family visit, and instead of the supervisor or whoever, I don't remember his role at the time, but the officer that actually physically intervened, there was just so little regard for his personal situation and his need to get the update, and that felt preventable to me. And so if we're talking about trauma-informed care, if we're talking about meeting young people where they are, we have to understand the need, like, to meet the need. And I felt like he was abandoned in a sense. And in fact, he was restrained when he didn't have to be, in my opinion.
Thank you for that. So if I can get the specifics of that situation, we can look into it. I did ask him actually about when the report from that visit would be provided, but it won't be for some time. So I'd like the specifics so we can act as soon as possible.
Okay.
Commissioner Terry.
I had two follow-up questions. One is, I guess, in relation to what you were saying, Chief Epps, about the crisis intervention teams. What would it look like, or what would the process involve to get, for example, gang intervention workers, those community intervention workers who are out in the streets doing that de-escalation work? What would that look like to have them be a part of the crisis teams?
So currently, what Chief Vera Rosa is moving towards, the direction that he has given, is we envision having a licensed therapist among our licensed staff, the probation officer positions on every unit, particularly at LP. And the crisis intervention team would include one of our social workers, it would include a credible messenger, and then somebody else that is connected to the youth. So we have community health workers that work with our youth. It's not about physical intervention. It's about being a presence. Hey, what's going on? Can we talk to you? Of obviously the distance and that proactive response. So what it would take for us to do is to, one, get some of the more urgent issues that seem to be more often than not what we're dealing with under control. Again, proactive supervision. To train our staff to be able to say, right now, this is not urgent intervention here. Not that they're always responding in that way, but we want them to look more dynamically at the situation. At this point, we need to call in crisis intervention. Understanding those points where you need to do that, to create distance for yourself, to now have the necessary officer presence should it escalate, and to make the necessary call so that CIT, crisis intervention, can respond to begin the de-escalation techniques, the discussing youth options, gaining cooperation, diffusing the situation appropriately, then taking the necessary action. So that's what it would take for us to have the proper training deployed, which is on the way. But first, we have to get things calmer, not perfect, but calmer, to be able to have that and really have it in a place where it's workable, understandable by everyone. So that's what it would take for us to do it.
Okay. And then, and I would love to follow up with you more, because I'm getting emails from people who are saying, we do this work. So how do we get in? So I can follow up with you on that. My second question had to do with, I think you were saying that, Director Rayleigh, that you are looking at some of those contextual factors to kind of contextualize the use of force incidents. Can you share what you all are looking at?
Certainly. So there's a number of different factors that go into the situations. There's youth that are, for example, using illicit substances. And when they don't receive those because they were intercepted, for example, then sometimes in that process, in the immediate moment, they might be violent. But in the long term, of course, we don't want them to use drugs. So there's a different things that are coming into play as the probation department implements different procedures and policies to ensure the safety and security of the facility. It actually can temporarily result in certain increases in certain actions of different kinds, whether it's the crisis intervention team or other things. So that's where we want to look into the data and determine what caused these different situations at different points and then causes the decreases after, right? And so that's where we need to make sure that we have the right information so that we know, was there something that happened in the community, for example, that resulted in an influx of youth? I don't know offhand what happened in April, but perhaps there was some kind of situation in the community that resulted in a sudden influx of youth who are all upset about some situation. So those are the kind of things that we need to look into the data and determine to make sure that we address the right issues.
Thank you. I have just a couple of questions. Would this data capture any attacks on officers?
Yes, as we look at how we're reviewing use of force. So it would be improved in the following ways. That there's a requirement that all of the use of force or physical intervention packets are completed by the end of the shift and submitted. So we're enforcing that requirement. We did a pilot for the month of August to see how that went. We will now launch starting next week, and some lag behind, but it was like 2 or 3 days, maybe a week, but still having the improved time for those to be completed. So now the next layer, next week we will begin in real time going through the incidents, unless it's been referred to IA, we will go through the incident at the use of force table. Initially, we'll go through all of them. We'll review the packets, information from the superintendent. We have an e-form where they're summarized in there. We'll go to the issue, look at video and have the discussion. We're in the process starting early next week, well, actually later in the week, but sending out invites to people that can be privy to that information, like the Office of Inspector General to have a representative, obviously somebody from our training unit, and we will have incidents at LP and Barry J to begin how we review those use of forces so that we are more timely in how they're being reviewed. We have the information more immediately and how we can respond more immediately. In addition, in the e-form, it talks about obviously the date, time of incident, location of incident, but it does ask, was a kid injured or was a staff injured? Were they referred to medical? All of the things in the regular report, but in real time, we'll be able to flow through that report during the review, so the information will be there.
So if any, how many of these physical intervention incidents at both institutions resulted in new filings for a crime?
I do, I have it for LP, so if you want to say for Barry J, I can go ahead and pull LPs.
So in the time frame that I believe I saw in something else, there have been no new crime filings since May of this year at Barry J. And then LP was a different.
And I want to say at LP, there were the 3, but I can in real time give you those. So if we want to move on to something else, I can find it and then I can give it to you so I don't delay anybody.
Well, Commissioner Meredith had a comment or a question.
He's talking to the mic.
Okay, if an officer is assaulted, are we not prosecuting then? Or I'm looking at all the use of forces here and I'm thinking some's got to be an assault on an officer. So, and the other thing I'll just toss out there, you don't have to answer the question right now, I'm just tossing it out. The other is, it might be well to look at the age of the staff involved internally when you're doing your reviews to see if the younger staff are more likely to use force than older staff, to kind of maybe look at a training issue there or an experience issue.
Well, I will respond, yes, when situations allow for assault. So there's a couple of things, and Mr. Meredith, you may agree or disagree in your experience. So if I am, say, well, when I have intervened in force and a kid pulls back his hand in the middle of a fight, and I am standing here, the kid pulls it back, and this hits me in my face, has he assaulted me? Is that one where we file a new charge? Now, if a kid straight on looks at me and you just clock me in my face, totally different, right? So we have not trained people properly to assess what those are. So when staff is assaulted, yes, we do. However, there are some prohibitions under the WIC code. So if a kid is there for a 707B offense, a serious violent felony, and there is a new charge on top of that, you cannot file new charges. Well, certain things you cannot file because it now becomes the controlling offense. And then because it is a lesser level offense, you're now stating this is the controlling offense and we filed this new offense, and you lose the integrity of the actual controlling offense, which may be murder, which may be attempted murder, which may be a serious violent assault under 707B. So there are some barriers there. If a kid is 18 years old and we can file the new charge, it now is an adult filing. So some barriers to work around that is why I brought up earlier today in the conversation, taking action under Welfare and Institution Code 208.5. Serious habitual individuals that are difficult to maintain in the facility. When I looked at that, I found 2 that LA County has done in the last 3 years. And again, there's poor tracking of documentation, but I have found 2. If we were using that when these issues occur, doing different interventions with the kid, we do have a mechanism to address it. I've also found that because of historically some of the things that are happening in LA County that have become practice or history, we have not taken benefit of permissions under Title 15. Administrative segregation, where you write an individual plan for a youth that is violent, assaultive, aggressive, problematic behavior on the unit, and work through that program, up to and including the multidisciplinary team, discussing those issues, and having a plan where you address the behaviors of that youth. So as we're rolling out our proactive supervision and we talk to the staff or supervisors and say, you have to use your options. I understand that those options have to be more robust through the appropriate policies, which we are either developing or revising so that our staff through the training are very aware of the options and that supervisors and directors are held accountable for addressing those options.
I understand the discretionary decision-making as far as it comes to what is an assault, what is not assault, in those circumstances. What I'm looking at is whether we're filing a charge or not, there has to be a consequence for assaulting on staff. And I think that's one of the reasons that some of the staff, at least the text messages, the emails they send me, is they're concerned about when I come in, I get assaulted, there is no consequence for the youth to keep him from assaulting me or another staff member. That's where I was kind of going with it.
And I certainly understand that, but what I really want to work for with our staff is understanding that sometimes, and I know that we can agree to disagree in many sectors, sometimes the big punch, the consequence that people feel like screams the loudest is in fact the reverse. Where if we have all of these other tools in place, you're empowered to do these because if you do them the right way, document them the right way, take the appropriate action under Title 15, under the WIC code that's permissible for us, we get the bigger punch. But if the only thing that we concentrate on is filing of charges, if you hurt someone and someone is seriously injured, we're going to file, but we also have to work with our staff with the continuum in between to address these behaviors and issues that don't rise to that level when you know it's likely to be kicked out in court. What do we do in that immediate time?
I just think we need to have clarity so staff understands there is a consequence at whatever level we're going to go to.
Understood.
Commissioner Jackson.
Yes, thank you. So I'm trying to connect some dots. And one thing that I'm sort of seeing is that the lack of effective crisis intervention is probably directly correlated with a poor sense of security for staff and young people, and how that sense of security could be perpetuating violence, and the violence is causing call outs and, toxic culture in the unit, so on and so forth. And so the dot that I sort of connected in this moment is that the lack of crisis intervention, good crisis intervention, well-equipped, trained people intervening in difficult moments to prevent use of force, that's probably directly connected to the staffing issue. And so I'm hearing you talk about the crisis intervention and how you guys are trying to work on rolling that out. It feels optional, but based on the way that I'm connecting and trying to analyze all of this, it's critical to have that in place in real time, because the price that we pay are uses of forces that, in my opinion, again, can be prevented. And so I don't know how far along you guys are with rolling out or getting the right people in place to do the crisis intervention, but the numbers are, even the proof is kind of there that you guys need to have something in place like immediately. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the short answer I would give, crisis into CIT is in place. Staff have received training. There's a video, a virtual training that people are doing. There are people that work through those things. Unfortunately, I believe it can be better. It can be deployed better. We do have a system in place that does have some successes, but it doesn't have the successes that we need. I agree with you. As I stated, there's a lot of incidents that are fast and dynamic moving, and it's just not opportune to deploy CIT because it's not safe to do so. But we are progressively moving towards that. And the foundation of what we're trying to do, proactive supervision, will allow us to do that. We're going to continue to work on putting the new pieces of that in place. And I agree, if we can expedite it, we will. But there are competing priorities, if you will, that kind of make it difficult to right now do that when you look at the more urgent priorities. Getting fights under control, getting major disturbances and multi-subject fights under control, creating a space in which staff are not hesitant to act because they feel that this will happen. When you do what's right and you follow the policy, we need them to understand that and to be empowered by that. But that is certainly a very close priority. I wouldn't even say second or third or fourth. Everything's urgent and a priority in LA County right now. And once we emerge from that space, we will be able to do everything you're saying, Commissioner, and I agree with what you're saying. It's just the competing priorities.
What's the timeline for getting those enhancements in place?
I'd like to see those enhancements by June of 2025, because of course that is, as was previously stated, people say, hey, I do this work. We can't just engage people and start giving contracts. There's a process. So to identify those partners, to identify a training, virtual training is great, especially when there's an urgent need. But I'm a classroom learner. I'm a demonstrated learner, right? So I would like to see that, the training different, and identifying the appropriate partners through the right process. Is that contracts? Is that memorandums of understanding because they're funded through other sources? So to identify that in the long game, I'm saying June. We hope to do it sooner, but June 2025 would likely be when we're able to do it.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Okay.
And I do have the information for the use of forces. So since February 2024, 3 cases have been filed as new charges in juvenile court. 1 case filed in juvenile court was actually as a violation of probation. And 2 cases were filed in adult court by the task force. All of the cases were the result of a youth or former youth attacking a probation staff. In 2 cases, a youth was the victim. 1, the result of an attack against another youth wherein the youth was sent to the hospital for treatment of a concussion. The other was when a youth held a shank to another youth's neck. Charges in juvenile court included 245As, the assault causing great bodily injury. And those were the circumstances of that. This does not include any external arrest because the request was specific to new filings for juveniles.
Wendy, do we have any live or written public comment?
No written public comment. If you'd like to make live public comment on this use of force issue, please come to the podium. And if you'd like to make public comment online, use the raise your hand function. We have one person with their hand up already. We'll get to you in a moment. You need to dial *3 if you're calling in. That'll put you in line. I don't see anybody. Are you going to do it? Okay, great. Welcome, Isabella.
Good morning, Commission. It's Tyreek again from the Anti-Recidivism Coalition. I just wanted to say, like, with this population, right, and we talking about abuse, officer, right, when they assault an officer, right, but also we need to talk about abuse of power, right, because that's a thing as well, right, and that leads to that unsafe feeling for the youth. And we got to have both of those inside of these reports because it allows us to really assess how things goes on. I know for us, just yesterday, I worked with 12 former SYTF youth at the ARC office. I've been working with them for over a year, and I've never had to use any type of force against them. Some of them come home just from a day. Some of them still have on the same clothes that they had on inside these facilities, and I've never had to use force on them. Not saying that is something that changes the way things is, but it's a thing that it shouldn't be 800 youths, especially when there's only 300 youth, because we're almost tripling that number of youth. That means there's three for every youth that's there, and that's an issue. There shouldn't be that much use of force. And also we got to create a safe environment for them. So we should, in this report, also include the abuse of power, if we're also going to include the assaults on officer, because it allows us to assess how we create a safe environment inside of these facilities. Thank you.
Hello again. We talked, Tyreek and I both shared this space yesterday with these youth, and we asked them just what would be something that would make you feel better? What could we do? Which I know is a different space, but I feel like their needs like correlate to while being inside too. They said opportunity, empathy, respect. We don't have as many problems with them like Tyreek said, because when we speak to them, it's lived experience, empathy, respect. So I just feel like that could be something that could be brought up, even I'm sure it already is, but like in trainings and stuff. Obviously you're gonna, not everybody is gonna get along, but if I'm approaching you with respect, if I'm remaining calm in a situation because I am way older than you, if you're in juvenile hall, I think it could be a good solution, or at least help get to a solution. Thank you.
Okay, we have one public commenter who is listed only as D. You may need to unmute yourself.
You hear me?
Yes.
Yes. I just wanted to address the sense of security with staff. When staff are assaulted, I don't think that staff are asking for children to always be refiled on or sent to court. But it also would help that if there was support. And what I mean by support, like if I call for assistance, I would like to know that somebody's coming, as opposed to people sitting in the office in movement control laughing or making light of the situation. Also, staff are very hesitant to respond. So I know that no one's coming if something's happening to me. So then again, why would I want to come to work if I know that the people that I'm working with are not going to be there to support me, or they're not going to get up? And then I have the supervisors or management laughing or making fun of the situation or making light of the situation. It goes in both hands. Like, you can't say that as supervisors, as directors, that we want staff to respond, but then I know that nobody's coming. I know that you're sitting in the window laughing or making light of it or joking about it or saying that's not a big deal.
Thank you. Commissioners, any final questions or concerns? Commissioner Terry?
Is it possible to get a response to that last comment?
The expectation is that when there is a code of any kind, be it a fight, be it a medical situation, anything where there's a call for assistance, that people are responding, that available staff are responding. I don't know, again, if there's a staff out there and these are concerns, I need your complaint. I need your email. Staff email me a lot. I've gotten 3 recommendations for deployments, how to change deployments. I got 4 emails last week about court officers who were held over. I get text messages. I encourage people to make appointments with me in my office. I have been on site at LP and I have responded with Ms. Binion to situations in the unit to provide support. If I see the staff have it, we are right there. We're still present. So my expectation is that people are responding to staff in crisis and they are being a support. And that should be a requirement. And if anybody is truly hesitant or not responding, then we have a problem. And I need to know specific incidents so that that can be dealt with. It's unacceptable. That is not the culture that Chief Vera Rosa is promoting. If you are paid to do the job, do the job. Do the job. I have said publicly, I have said privately, I've said to the unions, I've said to staff when I'm on site at LP, when you do the right thing and you follow the policy, we got you. But break the law, you are on your own. So that is the expectation. I am making it clear again here. If these things are happening to you, please don't use a code of silence. Don't give people a pass on that level of behavior or indifference because it creates a problem. So please make the necessary referral to an internal affairs, ombudsman, complaint directly to me. Everything that comes to Chief Vera Rosa is sent to myself or Chief Deputy Williams, and those things are responded to as necessary. We do not ignore those things to come. Even people that haven't heard from me on things they've recommended, I assure you, everything's been routed to the appropriate place to consider. If it's deployments, it's with the deployment work group. If it's use of force, it's with the use of force work group. And this is no different. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, if there are no further comments or questions, we will move to a short break before we proceed to the next agenda item. Any objections? We will take a 10-minute break and resume promptly at, I'm going to round it off to 11:40.
12-minute break. Thank you.
It is going better.
It is. In comparison, yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Actually asked.
Hey, commissioners, if you make your way back, we'll be starting in 1 minute.
Because they're not gonna wanna say, oh, I raped 3 year olds. You know what I mean? So, because I didn't have one to prevent. You know, I just did it. And I didn't say anything. In my mind. So these, you know. And so that's where it gets tricky too, because
Yeah, the kid.
while we bring up denials, that they're.
You're right. First we
That should be the list, but it's actually. Before they get denied a lot of things. Now they.
As you said, okay, and so with this,
And the persons I talked to, they didn't have.
Yeah. You want to volunteer? So if you don't believe it, that's.
Yeah.
She's one of our chaplains. She's off.
Yeah, because even in my group, I said, you know, the recommendation should be, could you provide a list, so when people apply, they know, if you have these, people get tonight. You know, they're gonna pull your record, and another thing,
Because.
they were saying.
Lots of me.
You know, and so that's.
That's actually.
You know, so, you know, different things.
Same thing.
Commissioners. Okay, welcome back. And we are going to start with item number 6. We will be discussing and taking possible action on the presentation from the Los Angeles County Probation Department on data related to intake trends, specifically how many intakes occurred between January 1st, 2024 and June 30th, 2024. How many of those were 707Bs and how many resulted in a detention recommendation from probation? As many of you know, the POC and I in particular have taken an interest in this issue as a way to help reduce the population at Los Padrinos Juvenile Hall, address the staffing crisis by reducing the need for staff, and maybe most importantly, make sure that we as a county are following the letter and the spirit of the Welfare Institution Code and the board's vision of Youth Justice Reimagined. Thank you for being here, Director Julia Vest. Please proceed with your presentation.
Thank you. So I'd like to just briefly talk about intake and give you some data. Our overall goal, just so you know, is to reduce detention. That's been my goal since I took over there 5 years ago. And it's my understanding that there's very little in the way of reducing the number of youth that we can detain, but even that little bit of amount, say 30%, 20%, is significant because those are children that could be home. So the ways that I wanted to share that I've been working on and our team has been working on is to reduce reduce the detention is to replace our intake screening tool and replace it with an evidence-based tool, which is called the DRE. We're also in the process of training our staff and training LEAs or law enforcement agencies around how that's going to impact the youth that they bring to our doors. And then thirdly, we're working on a DA pilot, which will be implemented in the next couple of weeks, which will embed a DA in intake that will be able to reduce charges in real time for those youth that come in on wobbler type cases. And those youth can also be released. In addition, Chief Epps has shared with us from her experience at San Bernardino an intake criteria list that will clarify exactly what law enforcement agencies need to know around what youth can be detained under the WIC code, what youth meet the criteria for detention and what youth do not, so that we can reduce youth that are even being put in the car, handcuffed, brought down to the station, because that even in and of itself is traumatic. So even if they bring them and we end up releasing them, we want to try and avoid that from happening to the youth by being more clear. If you can go to the next slide. So here's just some data from January to June of this year. And just to explain a little bit, it's broken down by gender. I highlighted female just because that's a focus of ours to try and reduce and meet the board motion to reduce female detentions. So I've highlighted that, and as you can see, there's quite a difference. So if you want to look across the board, it's been pretty consistent in terms of the numbers. I'll give you the totals just so you don't have to do the math in your head. But basically, January is typically lower intake. It's at 162. And then I gathered the data for July and August for intake, and we're back down to 166 for July and 167 for August. So typically intake does go up as school gets out. So it did go up in March, April, May. We had intake of 198, 193, and 210. But as you can see, it's coming back down towards the end of the summer. We're constantly looking at reports, how intake staff are assessing the youth coming in, how they're interacting with law enforcement, how they're pushing back when law enforcement are wanting to bring a youth that doesn't meet criteria. So that's all an internal quality assurance that we're doing. I was also asked to break it down by youth who committed 707B offenses, which are mandated detentions. And so if you look at the third category down, third and fourth category down, that gives you the numbers here. And if you look at the next slide, that might help you to understand the percentage of youth that are brought in out of 707B. So if you look at the next slide, going across for January, 707 youth that were brought in that were male for 707B offenses, it was roughly 85% of the youth, and 14% of the female youth for January. And it stays pretty much the same. It goes, fluctuates a little bit as I said before, it does tend to go up higher as school gets ready to get out, but then it stays around 85 to 88%. And just so you know, the youth that don't meet the criteria for mandated detentions under 707B, other youth that we are mandated to detain are placement runaway youth, youth who engage in domestic violence that is serious, where there's a danger to the mother or father or the custodial parent. We also detain youth under CDP who are brought in on a violation and have a court order that says detain on first violation. So we're mandated to detain those youth because of the court order. So that would make up the roughly 12 to 15% of the other youth. It also, if you look down, it goes down and talks about the youth that are released and the youth that are placed on CDP. CDP is Community Detention Program, or home supervision, some people call it. And what we really would like to do, and what we were talking about at the beginning of this meeting, is expanding that, because we, as Chief Epps said, we have the capacity to take 600 youth on CDP because we have 25 officers that have a cap of 28. But currently we are only servicing 145 youth on CDP. So we'd like to see more court referrals to CDP. We'd also like to see intake officers recommending CDP more often, which I have been working on, and that has gone up, but we can do better. And we're also talking about looking at the youth who are currently at Los Padrinos, who could possibly be structured release to CDP to reduce the pop in the hall. Any questions? That's the end of my presentation.
let's look at January's female 707B. It says you had 29 female that were detained, 15 were 707B, which would have been over 50%, but the number on the right says 14%. And then on the 82%, I'm sorry, on the males, 85, that number doesn't seem that it should be as high. That's 65%.
Well, I'm at the mercy of my data people, so I will ask them about that.
Okay, so if you guys are reviewing this, just kind of look at the math, do it, and maybe we can get that corrected and repost it. Okay. So with that, commissioners, if you have any questions and concerns?
There was a,
Sure, Terry.
okay. You had mentioned a evidence-based assessment tool. Could you just repeat the name of it? I didn't catch that.
Oh, sorry, DRAI, Detention Risk and Assessment Instrument. And it's originally out of Alameda, but it's being used in Santa Clara, Sacramento, and Alameda.
Yeah, I have a question. So can you clarify the relationship between the 707B female and the detention female? I maybe assumed that the number would be the same, but if we have this in the month of January, for example, if we have 15 707B females, will we not have the same number in detention?
No, because some of the youth that we detain are not 707B offenses. So placement runaways, if they come in on a CDP violation or domestic violence, they would not necessarily meet the criteria for 707B.
Yeah, but if this column says there were 15 707, that's the status, 707, there are 15 of them.
Yes.
What explains that there being 16 in detention? What's happening with the one female in detention? Is there a relationship between?
That's the recommendation.
It would,
Maybe I'm just,
no, it would be, I mean, it would have to be a situation in that month, which is unusual, where there's only one youth that didn't meet 707B, but came in on another charge that we still had to detain.
I think
Like a
what she's,
placement.
so.
Am I not understanding the question?
Yeah, the
Oh, okay.
16 is the recommendation. So out of the 29, probation at court recommended detention on 16. They had released 3 prior to court, and they had recommended CDP on 10. So those 3 numbers add up to the 29.
okay. Thank you for that.
Any other questions? So I do have a question about the DRE and the group. First, who represents the group that's working on bringing that, on onboarding the DRE?
Who represents the group?
Yeah, who's in the group? Is it just
It's-
probation
It's-
or?
Yeah, it's probation, and it's a recommendation that originally came from the Department of Justice in their settlement agreement. And it started about, I'd say 2 years ago, where we started to take a look at the fact that the LADS is not considered an evidence-based, nationally recognized evidence-based tool. And so there was concerns about how can we reduce detention if we're not using an evidence-based tool to assess whether to release or detain. And so we started to look at a variety of different tools across the nation that were recommended both by our previous chief as well as the DOJ monitor. And that's how we landed on the Alameda tool, because it was found that that tool was used to great success in other jurisdictions that were similar in population to LA. And it's an evidence-based tool that the focus is on simply assessing whether to detain or release, whereas the LADS is more broadly focused on not just detain or release, but also looking at case management needs. And so it asks a lot of questions about what the youth needs in the community, what some of the strengths and needs are that could be addressed in the community. But as intake officers, we should really only be assessing whether or not this youth can be detained or can be released safely into the community without the potential of recidivating in the next 48 hours.
So,
And so it just narrows the scope of what the intake officer does to simply assess detention or release instead of case management.
okay, so there are 2 points. There's the initial detention, which is basically governed by the Welfare Institution Code.
Right.
And the other point is the recommendation at court, if the kid ends up 2 days later, right? And what we have learned is that it should not be based solely on the offense and the elements of the offense, especially since it's an allegation. So I looked at the DRE, and it gives you a 10 no matter what your role in the offense was on the 707B. Gives you a 10. So let's say 3 youth go up to another youth, and 2 are behind that youth. That strikes the youth. All of them come in with the 211. They're all charged. But the other 2 actually did not physically attack the youth. So he gets a 10. And let's say that this guy just got caught up, and he has basically good behavior at home and good behavior at school. So he gets a 10 for the incident, but he only gets a -1 for the good behavior. So it really emphasizes, I was looking at it this morning, it emphasizes the offense and not the other areas that basically will tell the court if this youth is a continued risk based on his social makeup. And that's where I'm struggling with it, because the lads actually replace the Chrisberg, which is really similar to the DRE, except I see the DRE as a Chrisberg on steroids. And if we're not going to assess or talk about the other parts of a child's life, then why even have a report? Let's just send a score.
We actually do look at the other aspects of the child's life and the whole list of mitigating factors. I don't have it in front of me. I wasn't prepared to go into that, but just based on my review of it in recent times, there's, I think, at least 7 mitigating factors that you can get points for. Going to school, what the parent reports in terms of behavior at the home, et cetera. And each of those points can reduce the 10 down to a non-detained offense. And so it is, I think, addressed in terms of what you're asking the parent, what you're asking the youth in terms of the offense, but it narrows the focus to simply, do you feel that this youth can be safely doing well in CDP in the home with intensive supervision, or does this youth warrant a mandated detention? And as you know, you mentioned 211s. As you know, with the DA pilot, we're addressing 211s and 245s because those are considered cases, like you said, where there could be elements to the crime, such as an accessory or somebody's driving the getaway car or whatever, but they're not actually in the store. Those instances are going to be assessed by the DA to determine whether or not the DA would even be filing on those charges based on the elements and based on what's in the police report. So I disagree, but I think, we can talk about it more robustly, but I do feel that in talking with these other jurisdictions that have used it, I know Sacramento's been using it since 2007, it greatly reduced detention, significantly, which is our goal. And it did that because it was strictly focused on what is before them in terms of what the youth brought in terms of the police report, what are the parents saying about the youth's behavior, and it's strictly focused on that. Whereas the lads, there was a lot of focus on these extraneous things, which made it more subjective for the intake officer to, what I feel, kind of lean towards detention instead of leaning towards release. That extra information tended to give them cover for detention. And that would explain why some of these other jurisdictions are seeing such a decrease in detention with this narrow focused tool
You said since 2007, correct?
for Sacramento.
Okay, so LA County had 1,800 kids in 2007, and we dropped 30–40% in the first couple of years with the lads, but it was effectively being used. The employees, the officers were actually, they would give the kid a score on the lads, and they're almost identical to what the Dre has, the areas. And then they would have to support that in the report. And that goes back to my initial point, is that there's no discretion on the 10, but there is discretion on the mitigating ones. And that seems to be, you go back to, even if you change it, how do you effectively assure that the staff, in using their discretion, are using it in a way that is fair and accurate?
Well,
Because we end up in the same point with the lads, with the Dre. If
Yeah.
staff are not really using the two the way it's supposed to be,
right.
then we're really just changing one tool that's going to fail for another tool. So I'm just curious about that.
Well, with anything that you put in place to address issues, you have to provide the proper training, and then you have to have the proper oversight. And even though you have those two, there has to be consistent follow-up. Have you been appropriately trained to use the tool? Are you appropriately using it through audits, through inspecting what you get? Because I've said it here, you do not get what you expect, you get what you inspect. So building in those tools, and then proper oversight. So as Ms. Vest has been saying, I talked with her, Dr. Dietel, Dr. Dietel from DOJ, not to get too much in it. I am familiar with the Dre. I'm familiar with some of the successes that other jurisdictions have had that are comparable to the circumstances here in LA. When you look at populations and you look at what has happened, the outcomes that Alameda and other jurisdictions have had have been successful. I will tell you in my assessment, and I'm not an expert in the Dre, but when you just look purely from a process policy perspective, when you look at these numbers, for example, where you just talked about CDP, just to pull something out of the air, you have populations that have peaked at above 300 in a very large facility. How is it that only 28.57 of the kids that come in for intakes are released to CDP? There is an underusage problem here in LA County that has been a long-term practice. We are not using things like CDP appropriately. The second layer of that would be putting something in place like the Dre that not only assigns a score for the offense, but it has all of these other factors that you consider: case management needs, family issues. And so those things are in concert with this. Not one thing will, I think, only effectively influence it, but working with all of those things in a continuum. So the last thing I'll say about that is we have not taken a very good look at IDC processes or policies in this county in a very long time. We did not, I am baffled how this county this size has operated without a sincere intake criteria tool. How is it that for years, and I ask and ask and ask while I was here, that this county has operated without an intake tool to guide their officers on this is an intakeable offense? How is it that people were able to respond to me and say, well, a long time ago, a judge ordered that you will take everybody that they call us about, even if it is a cite and release offense, we will give people an override and we will take you into custody. So those things had not been tended to in the processes as a policy item or as a practice item. So we have stopped giving overrides for offenses that are cite and releases. They are not to be booked into the facility. No matter where you are in the WIC, the Welfare and Institution Code, there are two standards for intakes. Is the kid a risk to themselves, or are they a risk to others? And when is that risk mitigated within so much, as you said, the 48 hours, can you address it? So if we stick to the intake criteria, we couple that with using appropriately within WIC Code 840, and 638, I believe, outlines the criteria or the identifiers and where you can use electronic monitoring. Now you bring in to support that, assessing intakes with the DRE that not only gives a number for the offense, but has all of the other criteria that looks at case management, family, as I stated, that you now have a continuum in place that allows you to look at what we have in LA County. At the end of the day, we have an issue here with over detaining youth that should be at home. And it is a problem that we are addressing, and the DRE will be beneficial to do that.
I hope so. Commissioners?
I just have a
Commissioner Jackson?
clarifying question. Is all that you just described, is that what your suitability assessment is? That we've sort of hinted at earlier?
Are you talking about the detention report that she mentioned earlier?
She just said that there is a suitability assessment that they'd like to implement at some point, and I'm wondering if that's at play in what she's describing.
So I think she's talking about the LADS versus the DRE that'll change, replace it, I think.
Okay.
No,
No.
Ms. Epps, you,
Oh.
earlier in our meeting, you were talking about a suitability assessment when we were talking about decarceration. It wasn't on this agenda item, but I'm wondering if it's related.
So that's thank you. The detention reduction plan does include putting in place a new intake criteria. It does include, we didn't put it written into the plan, but we are looking at increasing the use of CDP. So yes. Now, thank you for clarifying that.
Okay.
So it would include training for the recommendation part of it then?
Yes, in fact, we have a consultant that has been brought in, the author of Proactive Supervision. He also has expertise in intake, report writing, court officers, and decision-making in that continuum. He is looking at a sample on the calendar year of intake reports. I can tell you that what I've looked at, he will be provided with samples of those intake reports to look at what the recommendations were, independent of my review. So we are looking very closely at that, and those are things that will help us to improve intake.
I look forward to seeing all this. Commissioners? Hey, Wendy, do we have any written or live public comments?
I don't believe we have any written public comment on this. I see some folks coming up to give public comment in the audience. If you'd like to give public comment on WebEx, please use the raise your hand function. If you're calling in, please dial *3 and your phone number will pop up in our list. Start, Jessica. Sorry. Never mind.
Jessica Gonzalez, I'm a Youth Justice Program Manager with Court Appointed Special Advocates for LA. I'm just curious about how many youth are detained or not given the option for CDP because they're under the supervision of DCFS, and DCFS may not have adequate or appropriate placement for them. I feel like a lot of our young people that are under the supervision of DCFS spend extended periods of time at Los Padrinos because there's no placement for them. So that's just my concern.
Thank you. You are speaking my language.
Let's see if there's any more public comment that I know you will want to address that question. Nobody online. Okay, go right ahead.
So, I'm sorry, first Chief Vera, because he banned me from saying 2 words, San Bernardino. But I'm gonna say it. So when I was in San Bernardino, we worked very closely with our Children and Family Services to look at our dual status youth. I feel personally, very strongly, but not for you having your caregiver, guardian, or parents, that many of these kids end up in detention because you can't control what's really incorrigible behaviors. Yes, some kids break the law, but for many things that these kids would have gone home for, but not again, for the absence of the parent, caregiver, guardian, they end up in detention. I agree 100% with you. So there are 2 things. We did implement a program in San Bernardino where all of these kids, when eligible, just like any other kid, were released on electronic monitoring and still remained under the care of CFS. In addition to what we did is we had the day reporting centers and interventions, preventions that probation provides. We opened up those resources to them to attend those classes. So that is very much a part of. We have our first phase of alternatives to detention or detention reduction, as we call it, but that is very much on our radar. But we want to have the right conversation with our partners in children and family services to lay out same or similar strategies. The goal is not to do exactly what we did in San Bernardino because the demographics are different, the needs are different. But to work with our partners in those spaces, the Public Defender's Office, the District Attorney's Office, Children and Family Services, the same or similar way to come up with guidelines on how we deal with our dual status youth from the 241 hearing and throughout the process to address that differently. So it's very much on our radar. I'm not ashamed to say I just have not had, and like I said, competing priorities, time to really dig into that space to look at the numbers. But it is on the radar. I cannot wait to get to it. It is a personal thing that I feel strongly about and I'm very concerned about. So it's coming. Thank you though for that.
If I can add one thing. So I also feel very strongly about this, and I was actually on the board of CASA at one point. So I can tell you that there are a lot of great collaborations that can occur, and I don't know that they are occurring. There are things like child-specific funding, for example, and a lot of mechanisms through the state that can be used for these kinds of collaborations and funding for these youth. Put them on electronic monitoring, pay for their housing, all kinds of things that can occur, and we're excited about those opportunities for collaboration.
So, I can also add that a couple of years we did open it up for CDP to be utilized in STRTPs. It's not being widely utilized, but it is something that we did change a couple of years ago.
Okay, if there's no more public comment, commissioners, questions, concerns? All righty, moving along. Well,
So just really quick, I'm just trying to find the author of proactive supervision. Do you know their name?
That would be Probation Officer Todd Holmes.
Commissioner Mundo has given me a point of opportunity because Commissioner Jackson over there is being, as usual, humble. The Probation Oversight Commission, 2.5 years ago, it might actually even be longer than that, before any of the probation folks at this table were working for the department, even before Chair Mundo was here, Chair Jackson and at that time, and Commissioner Kakani made a request for information about monthly intake data that was actually never provided fully. It has since been provided since the new leadership came in, but they asked for that information specifically with the idea to look at who was being detained and to ask probation to make data-informed decisions. So I just want to, since it's, I guess, my job to be the history here, that it is really incredible to hear these things said in public in this forum, in the way that the commissioners asked for many, many years ago. And of course, that Chair Mundo has taken on as his, not only his career, but also his priority in terms of his work here with the commission. So it's quite a pleasure to see that progress.
Thank you for reminding me of my humility.
Well, now that it's well in hand, I'll move on to other tasks in the department and oversight of other things. Now that Mr. Holmes from San Bernardino is on board. So for item number 7, we will hear a report from the August 20th Probation Oversight Commission's Leadership Retreat, where the leadership team of commissioners and staff discuss how to improve the process by which probation data and information is shared with the PLC and outline strategies for updating the existing data sharing agreement, MOU, to ensure that the data being requested and provided is relevant, accurate, and not overburdensome to the department. When I first started coming to probation commission meetings before PRED and before it became this official body, you couldn't get anything from probation. Anything except wrong answers and evasiveness. But today, just the amount of data we have today shows you how far we've come. And we're very appreciative. And Ms. Epps, I can tell you that it was supercharged when you came aboard. And we appreciate that. There's some outstanding stuff. We want to continue the relationship with collecting data and sharing it with the public and the agencies and the stakeholders. We have an MOU that is outdated. It was signed, I think, by Chief Gonzalez many years ago. Yeah, so we would like to, at some point, meet and just talk about working together on a data collection process that doesn't burden the department while it's trying to get a grip of its population at the juvenile hall. Making sure that we identify meaningful information, meaningful data, and that we consistently share it so people can see the good work that the county is doing in trying to reduce the harm that detention itself, not that probation inflicts, but detention itself and the system inflicts. So that was the key points of our retreat. I have Commissioner Terry's here if she would like to add anything, or Commissioner Canales. Okay, good. So I guess with that, I'm going to conclude my report. It was pretty simple and pretty straightforward. And again, I hope that most people heard the most appreciative thing about it is that we have been getting a lot of information, and we're grateful for that. So with that, Wendy, do we have any written or live public comments for item number 7?
No written public comments. Does anyone want to make comments on the data retreat, item number 7? Nobody in the room, nobody online. We'll move forward.
Exciting. We're moving along. So item number 8 is for matters not posted on the agenda to discuss or place on a future meeting agenda for action. If you'd like to provide public comment on the next item for general public comment, please raise your hand now and we'll be ready for you when we go to that item. Commissioners, do you have any announcements or items you would like placed on a future agenda? Commissioner Meredith?
Yes, I want to recognize the department for a very effective response to the bridge fire with our 3 camps that were up there in San Dimas, Laverne area. I was up there with them for 2 nights. Fortunately, the fire burned away from our facility. Unfortunately, it burned up into Wrightwood. But what I discovered is since the Woolsey fire and the Saddle Ridge fire, which was handled very effectively, they've come up with better plans and better equipment. They actually had some response vehicles up there, have an emergency management team. So probably around January, I'd like to have them come to a presentation on what their role is and what they're doing. But I was very impressed with the plan of action they had in the event we had to evacuate, which fortuitously we did not.
Thank you. Commissioners?
I do. I mean,
Commissioner Jackson?
sorry, I don't know, I've been away for a little bit and I'm not current on some things, but I feel like the sexual misconduct lawsuit like that is sort of like the elephant in the room. I was working on that previously and it's kind of like been lying dormant as far as I know. So I'd like to agendize, we can talk about how that's agendized, but I'd like to have that sort of resurfaced. Yeah.
Of course, just send something to the leadership team and we'll work with you to get that on the agenda. Any other? So I just like to share that during the last couple months, me and a little posse have been visiting courtrooms and court corridors just to, as PLC commissioners and as a group, just to get a feeling of what experience the youth that are on probation and their families are getting from probation, and it's been positive. We've been to Sylmar, Compton, East Los Angeles. We hope to get to the other courts by the end of the fall. I'm encouraging my fellow commissioners, especially those that have courts in their appointed districts, to join us. Eventually, we would like to have what they have in the adult court, which is a juvenile court watch. Under 676 of the Welfare Institution Code, we are able to go into the cases that are 707Bs and that there is no special order that keeps us from doing that. So as we grow, and we're going to try to formalize this and hopefully have 7 groups that just visit the courtrooms and sit around the the hallway and sit in the courtroom and just to get a really understanding of the dynamics of court. So, okay. So, with that, we'll end that item, and agenda, item number 9 is an invitation for members of the public to address the commission on items not on the agenda. Wendy, please facilitate public comment for us.
If you'd like to make public comment on any items not on the agenda or anything you want to talk about within the realm of the Probation Oversight Commission, please come up to the podium or raise your hand on WebEx or send us an email, info@poc.lacounty.gov. I almost just forgot our email address. If you're on the phone, dial *3, and we will start with Mr. Bell.
Well, I just wanted to end it out with the staffing issue again. I wanted to see if we look at other avenues on why the staffing is short. Have we talked to Cedric? If maybe that could be an agenda item as well. Anybody looking to Cedric? Are they getting their cases done? Are they getting the appointments made on time? Also, we had a lot of people being walked out lately. Is that affecting the staffing issue at LP? How is that affecting versus call outs? Because sometimes when I get the number of people being walked out, I think, is it really a call out issue? Or are we being taken off on administration leave? Is that's what's really affected? So I would like to see those two things, if those two things are having a big effect on the staffing issue at LP, not so much just call outs. Thank you.
Thank you. And I believe Cedric is workers' comp for the county. Is that right, Mr. Bell? Thank you. Anybody online? Okay. Oh, sorry. I've got the names in front of me. We'll start with Crystal Jones. Crystal, we're going to unmute you.
I want to say I love the idea from our deputy chief with the regards to the youth being released with ankle monitoring bracelets and supervision and resources.
Crystal, maybe you need to unmute yourself?
I'm unmuted.
She shows up as unmuted.
Can you hear me now?
Crystal, can you try again?
Maybe it's not working.
All right, let's go. We'll come back to you, Crystal, if we can figure it out. Let's go to Lupe Ross. Ms. Ross, thank you for being here today. That makes me think maybe it's something on our end. Lupe, I need you to accept the unmute request. Is it possible people can hear them online?
Hello?
But not in the room? Yeah, the people online can hear her. It's just us in the room that can't hear her.
It keeps going to.
Oh, okay, great. Now we got you. Okay, thank you for your patience.
Okay.
All right, so
Thanks.
Crystal, we'll come back to you after Ms. Ross finishes. Thank you, Ms. Ross. And you can begin with your 2 minutes.
Thank you. I'd like to address something with Ms. Epps. Ms. Epps, my question to you is, at the graduation for probation at Walt Disney Studios, were you the probation representative at that ceremony?
Is that the end of your public comment, Lupe, or did you want to use the rest of your 2 minutes? Why don't you go ahead, complete your comments.
Okay, because I wanted to make a statement about her. I'd really appreciate it because there was havoc after the ceremony ended, and I believe it was Miss Epps, and she showed such courage trying to protect our youth from hurting themselves and hurting others. I have to commend her for that. My other thing is, I'd like for Ms. Epps or somebody to look into, if we're talking about electronic monitoring, releasing and getting the population down at the camp, not just the juvenile halls, but the camps. We have to look at the RFA. process. It's my understanding that there's still just one person that has to deal with probation, authorizations, adoptions, out of county, DCFS, but they keep getting deployed. Every time we get a new probation officer, then, when we call in, then a supervisor calls us to say that's no longer our probation officer because they've been deployed to LP. So I think somebody seriously needs to do that. And Ms. Epps seems to be the one to get to the bottom of things. So I would appreciate it if she could please take an interest in this and check into that RFA process, because we're not getting approved. It takes months and months to get approved to get our kids out of there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ross. Ms. Epps, if you don't mind, we'll finish the public comment and then come back and let you address those issues. RFA stands for Resource Family Approval, which is what used to be known as the foster family approval process. We'll go to Crystal Jones next. Crystal, can you unmute yourself?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, thank you guys. Hi, everybody. I just wanted to say thank you for the progress and the updates with the data, and just wanted to really uplift and highlight Miss Kimberly Imp's perspective in regards to that monitoring and releasing the kids out into the community with supervision and real life resources. I just want to advocate for some of the youth that are incarcerated. They don't have the love or guidance in the direction, and if we could be their intervention to provide those resources, safe homes, and supervision with monitoring, I think that would be a great step for intervention and prevention. Thank you so much to all your work you're doing.
Thank you, Crystal. Okay, and I think our final caller is Olivia Shields. Olivia, you can unmute yourself. Olivia, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, you can begin.
Okay, great. Good afternoon. I'm with Urban Peace Institute and LA The Uprising Coalition. I'd like to take this time to uplift the words of youth who are currently incarcerated in Los Padrinos about a wildly unreasonable protocol that, if changed, would have an undoubtedly positive impact on youth. Justin says it causes his mom pain for him not to be home or not to be able to hug him. I would like to hug my mom because it will make my mom more strong. He says a hug would make me do better for her and make it home to her. Anthony asserts it shouldn't be a question why you should be allowed to hug their parents at a time when they are fighting for their life. What type of people don't allow that? I want to know why. Ivan says he's been having a difficult time inside, and hugging his parents would make him feel much better and feel more connected to his family. He believes hugs would make our day and their day as well and help us by doing good inside our walls. Ruben says, hugging my mom would mean the world to me. I can see it in my mom's eyes how much it's hurting her because she can't hug me. She has always seen me as her baby, so she cries every time she comes to see me. I feel that it's harder to be rehabilitated without hugging your loved ones. Hugging my mom would make me shed a tear because I would finally be able to feel that connection I have with my mom. Current protocol at Los Padrinos says that visitors are not allowed any physical contact with youth inside. These young people are deprived of the most simple and crucial form of reassurance, support, and love, which is hugging their mamas. Especially with the extensive search process for visitors, like Anthony said, I want to know why this is even a protocol at all. I could cite extensive research, such as a 2021 study in the Journal of Youth and Adolescence that found lacking physical touch in adolescence is linked to increased anxiety, depression, and emotional dysregulation. But what I really want everyone listening to think about is how they would feel if this was their child writing these words, or if they couldn't hug their loved ones. I'd like to request that the POC discuss changing this policy next meeting and to complete some preliminary research beforehand. This is a priority for youth inside and should be a priority to you all, and I'm happy to be a resource as well for further consultation. Thank you.
Thank you. That's the end of our public comment, and I would assume that Deputy Chief Epps would like to address some of those things.
So we'll wait to respond on the hugs issue, to hear the data and the agenda for next time to have that discussion. And while I thank you for the compliment, it's a good mark of leadership is how well your people do. So while, yes, I was at the graduation, so was our whole entire SEO team. Our kids had already been escorted out of the auditorium. They heard the disturbance and immediately responded back to the auditorium to assist. So yes, while I got to be there, and as was Chief Deputy Williams and all of the administration that was present for LACO, they were a tremendous help in addressing the issues that occurred. So thank you, but that has nothing to do with me. That was all them, their response, and taking action to ensure people's safety, the public and our kids as well. We will take a look at the RFA process. Thank you for the comments on electronic monitoring. And just thank you. Thank you. We appreciate being recognized. These are all Chief Vera Rosa's visions. It's been muddy water getting to the vision that he laid out when recruiting me to come here. But I felt strongly then, and I continue to feel strongly that everything that he has laid out will come to pass. We are working steadily towards that, to achieve the vision that he's laid out for this department and to get there. So thank you very much for the recognition.
Sure, thank you. The first question, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Well, I guess one thing that I wanted to agendize, if this is just matters not posted, so in addition to the misconduct, the class action lawsuit, also want to agendize a budget analysis. Just a refresher on where dollars are going for all of the different plans that you guys have in place. So that's something I'm also able to email with more detail on what we'd like to discuss in the future. And also, I have a question for Ms. Epps. So obviously, you're at the helm of a lot of this. You have a lot of responsibility, probably a lot of pressure. Just wanted to ask you if your needs are being met as a leader who's responsible for executing on a lot of this stuff. Oh.
Didn't you hear public comment today?
You know, as a team, right? Because no one individual does it. I think the best way to say it is the chief is like the car with the navigation, right? He gives you all the directions, and then he passes that off to all of his chief deputies, his directors, and they're the gas in the car that makes it go. So we're very much in sync with that. Chief Vera Rosa is very clear on that. The fact that he has trusted myself and others to come to this forum that he views as critically important and communicating his vision appropriately. Yes, it is. Is it not tiring? Is it not taxing? I would be lying if I didn't say that. This is a lot of late hours, but I am not alone in that. Our staff are coming into the facilities I touched on earlier, being held over in response to call outs. Much of the tasks that they deal with, new thing after new thing being introduced, but they stay the course. So we're getting there. My needs die in comparison to that. I get to go to my office. I can choose to be on the grounds of LP, which I do frequently do, as does the chief. So I just want to say, yes, my needs are being met. We're able to achieve the chief's vision to, no matter how tough it gets, and it gets tough, to still make it work and to continue to do that. So thank you for even asking. Sure.
Commissioner Canales?
Yes, thank you. Going back to the staffing issue, I was wondering if we have any data or if we can get the data on staff that it's not so much call out, but maybe being walked off or put on investigation for administrative leave, how many staff that is affecting and the reason why too. If we could get data on that. And then I just want to touch on the caller's comment about, the hug and visiting. Maybe we can create an ad hoc, because I know when I was doing research some time ago, Kathleen Connolly, who was the vice president of the Humane Society at the time for research chimpanzees, said that it was detrimental to a chimpanzee's mental and health, well-being, not just to see and hear other chimpanzees, but to touch and feel. And when the caller called in with that comment, I immediately thought of that quote. While chimpanzees are protected by federal law to be able to have the ability to touch and feel, but yet our youth, it took me back to Mother's Day when I was at Los Padrinos, and I was talking to all the families out there, and one of the mothers looked at me, and I thought, oh, they're still going to get visiting, even though there was some incidents. They're working hard, they're pushing through. And I was excited about that, because I did see probation going above and beyond, even though there was incidents, right? So I was wanting to uplift that, and the mom just looked at me so like, just like there was nothing, right? And she said, can you find out, can you ask if they'll just let us hug our sons on Mother's Day? You know, so maybe that's something we could create an ad hoc over or something and do the research ourselves. I already have plenty of it.
Thank you. Hey, with that in mind, we'll go to agenda.
Can I just quickly ask, them not being able to hug their parents, is that tied to a security issue? I would imagine that with the contraband and all of that, it's restricted because, yeah.
It is a security issue. I know one thing that Superintendent Binion, but like I said, competing priorities, is considering is smaller groups for visiting and spreading visiting across the week. So it's not just heavily concentrated on Saturdays and Sundays. And in those smaller groups, certainly you may have options to do something different. But right now, I can tell you it is related to a safety and a security issue. That makes sense.
And Sacramento has that spread across the week, so that's good.
Thank you.
All right, now we'll get to agenda item 10. Adjournment of the regular meeting of September 12th, 2024. Thank you all for joining us and sharing your comments. As a quick reminder, be sure to follow us on social media and subscribe to our YouTube channel at LA County POC. To receive reminders about our upcoming meetings, visit our website at poc.lacounty.gov to subscribe to our email listing. Can I have a motion to adjourn today's meeting?
After I commend you for your excellent time management skills today.
Thank you,
Yes.
Commissioner Jackson. And a second?
Second.
Canellis. Commissioners, please unmute yourselves and vote with a voice vote.
Aye.
Aye. It is now 12:36. On motion by Commissioner Jackson, seconded by Commissioner Canales. Today's meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.
Safety, they're fighting safety.